The Monsters That Made Us is brought to you by the Cage Club Podcast Network. For all things movies, music, media, monsters, and more, head on over to cageclub.me. That's cageclub.me. Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. These are the words that will come to haunt young Lawrence Talbot as he returns to his ancestral home to bury his recently deceased brother, reconnect with his estranged father, and claim his inheritance. After meeting and falling in love with a young woman at a local antique shop, he accompanies her and a friend on a visit to some visiting gypsies for a palm reading before a fateful encounter with a wolf. Talbot is bitten, but manages to slay the beast with his newly acquired silver-tipped cane. The next morning, his wound is miraculously healed and the gypsy fortune teller is found bludgeoned to death. Before long, the body count begins to rise and Talbot realizes the stories he's been hearing about werewolves are true, and it's only a matter of time before he destroys those closest to him. Grab plenty of silver and wolfbane and join us as we track down the Wolfman.
To a new world of gods and monsters.
Listen to them, children of the night.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you? I'll show you who I am and what I am.
You're insane. I tell you, I killed a wolf, a plain, ordinary wolf.
By studying these and other species, we add to our knowledge of how life evolved, how it adapted itself to this world.
He went for a little walk. He should have seen his face.
Welcome to The Monsters That Made Us, the podcast where we celebrate the spooktacular characters and films in the Universal Studios classic monster series. Today we're celebrating the 80th anniversary of the film that made Lon Chaney Jr. a monster icon. That's right, I'm talking about 1941's The Wolfman. I'm the Invisible Dan Colón, and joining me as always is my co-host, the Wolf Slayer himself, Monster Mike Manzi. How are you, Mike?
Dan, the way we walk is thorny, but it's of no fault of our own. Doing pretty good. It's great to be here tonight.
So this episode is kind of a big deal. We've reached the film that many would consider to be the last great Universal monster movie, at least from the golden age of horror. Not only are we getting a career-defining performance from Lon Chaney Jr., but we're also getting two other Universal monster stars, Claude Rains and Bela Lugosi. Not as the Invisible Man and Dracula, of course, they've got supporting roles here, but having these three titans in the same movie just makes the whole production feel just that much bigger. Because remember, Universal's still pinching pennies here, very much so. But even without those stars, we've still got a brilliant script from Curt Siodmak that established much of what we think about in terms of werewolf mythology, from a bite transferring the werewolf curse to using silver to kill a werewolf. There's some fantastic art direction and cinematography, and a beautiful score, not to mention some of the most iconic monster makeup of all time. It's hard to imagine the Wolfman not being a huge hit. Now, I might be showing my hand here a little bit, but I really love the Wolfman. Mike, what was your experience with the Wolfman? I'm assuming you've seen this one before.
Yeah, I had seen this one several times before. I love the Wolfman. I love werewolves. I mean, we went into it a bit in our Werewolf of London episode, talked about Teen Wolf, but, another very impressionable thing for me growing up was the Thriller music video with Michael Jackson, and in the beginning of that is one of the coolest werewolf transformations on screen, so, that was really great, and, yeah, I think wolves are cool, and just people transforming into animals is a great theme, and I really like this movie. I hadn't watched this movie in quite a while. I was surprised, how really good this one is. Maybe it is because, like we talked a bit before we started recording, the last few movies were sort of more kind of like B movies, but they've totally brought their A game to this one. And it's everything but the full moon, Dan. I was really surprised, how much of the lore is all here. And I had a really nice time rewatching it.
Yeah, it's funny. Every time I show this movie to somebody else who hasn't seen it, I have to tell them, it's going to seem really heavy-handed in terms of the werewolf rules. I let them know, this is the movie where a lot of it really was established. There were no consistent folk stories. I think we said in the Werewolf of London episode that for as long as human beings have been telling stories, there have been stories about people turning into animals. But in terms of werewolves, there wasn't really a one consistent mythology. So Curt Siodmak invented just about all of this. I mean, we'll talk about it, but we get that poem about even a man of pure in heart. That gets mentioned 3 times in the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, and even the curse, the line that
Right.
I stole for the opening is repeated kind of over and over again. Yeah, I went a little deeper into the extra materials for this episode because there were more on the disc. Like there was a couple nice special features, and you get guys like Joe Dante, Mick Garris, and of course John Landis like talking all about the werewolf stuff. And I was very surprised to learn, most of all, that it did all kind of come from nowhere in a manner of speaking. There's sort of the legend of the werewolf is kind of like that there is no legend. There isn't like every society has their own belief. That kind of didn't seem to be the case. And so it's really nice how this creature, I feel like more so than the rest, is created in the lab, in the universal lab.
All right, let's get into it. I don't want to bury the lead here. We have a lot to talk about in terms of Lon Chaney Jr., who was Universal's ultimate sad boy, and quite possibly the hardest working man in Hollywood at that time. He was certainly the hardest working man at Universal. Lon Chaney played, I think, just almost all of the monsters over the course of his time at Universal. But the thing I love most is that the Wolfman was uniquely his. He went on to play the Frankenstein monster, the Mummy, Dracula, but nobody ever played the Wolfman except for Lon Chaney. So there's a ton to discuss here in terms of like Lon Chaney and the Wolfman in particular. I did the best I could to be comprehensive, but without getting too caught up in some of the finer details. So hopefully we can do the Wolfman justice here.
Oh yeah, I have no doubt.
Lon was born Creighton Tull Chaney on February 10th, 1906.
I have to jump right in and just say, learn something right away. I was like, I got to turn my horror card in. I didn't know that his name was Creighton.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that either. I've always just known him as Lon Chaney Jr. You mentioned Lon Chaney, people will say junior or senior. I had no idea that his birth name was Creighton. Born February 10th, 1906, he did not have the best childhood growing up. Following his mother's suicide attempt and his parents' subsequent divorce in 1913, Creighton spent the next couple of years in various homes and boarding schools until his father began his career in the film industry in 1916. Now, his father, obviously, Lon Chaney Sr. Now, Sr. had experienced many hardships as a working actor and was really adamant about not letting his son follow in his own footsteps, and instead encouraged Creighton to become a plumber. So he sent him to like a technical school to start his own plumbing business. Now, when Lon Sr. died in 1930, there was nobody left to stop Creighton from pursuing a career as an actor. So that's when he decided right then and there, that's what I'm going to do. You know, I don't think his heart was really in plumbing, and who can blame him there?
Yeah, and some of the extended behind-the-scenes stuff, like I was very shocked to learn that he took on a vocation, like he became a plumber, like that he wanted to be an actor, but he had to sort of do this extra job.
Right, and from a parent's perspective, I can totally understand that. To this day, I don't think parents are really thrilled to find out that their kids are going to become actors, you know? Plumbing would certainly be a more stable career choice, but whatever it was, young Creighton had his heart set on acting, and once he had the opportunity to do that, that's immediately what he did. Now, he was billed as Creighton Chaney initially. He began with uncredited bit roles with RKO. He first started in The Galloping Ghost in 1931. And then he basically just took every job he could get his hands on, which were mostly uncredited bit roles in a number of films for both RKO and Monogram Pictures, including many westerns where he would do a lot of his own stunts.
You know, I love that. I love to hear that. It's kind of a shame that he doesn't take a fall off out of a tree or anything in this movie. The dude he's a big dude. He's like a Frankenstein monster-sized man, you know, on his own. That was a cool factoid. I love to learn that.
Yeah, he doesn't get any fun falls or anything like that, but he does fight a lot. Over the course of his tenure as the Wolfman, they do put him in these physical altercations, so he does get to do that. But yeah, it would be fun to see him like take a big fall or do some kind of really cool, impressive stunt. I agree. Now, in 1935, at the insistence of his agent, he reluctantly changed his name to Lon Chaney Jr. in the hopes that that would land him better roles. Unfortunately, it didn't work. He spent the next couple of years bouncing back and forth between Paramount and Commodore Pictures, doing more supporting roles, more westerns, with an occasional lead role here and there. In 1937, he signed a contract with 20th Century Fox where he did no fewer than 28 films in 2 years, working alongside the likes of Tyrone Power, Robert Taylor, Barbara Stanwyck, Walter Brennan, Gloria Stewart, Ethel Merman, Peter Lorre, and even the Werewolf of London himself, Henry Hull, in the 1939 film Jesse James. Supposedly, the only reason 20th Century Fox kept him on was because whenever it was time to renew his contract, he never asked for a raise. Later on in 1939, he landed the role of Lenny in a stage production of Mice and Men. He would then reprise his role in the 1939 film adaptation starring alongside Burgess Meredith. And from that point on, Lon was basically the go-to guy for big, hulking characters. So uncoincidentally, Universal came calling, and Lon made his Universal debut as Dynamo Dan the Electric Man in 1941's Man-Made Monster, a sci-fi horror film which was originally conceived for Boris Karloff. Now, Universal was still seemingly uninterested in Lon as a horror star. They kept offering him supporting roles in some comedies, musicals, and westerns before finally giving him the lead in The Wolfman.
So strange because he is huge.
Yes.
He's a big, hulking, Frankenstein-sized man. Like, he's not ugly. I'm not saying he's he's a monster man, but I'm saying he's like perfectly built to play everything. Like, it's too bad they didn't have Jason back then.
The thing that I love most about his performance in The Wolfman versus his performance elsewhere is that, with the exception of Dracula, he plays the Frankenstein monster and the Mummy, and those are basically just sort of one-note lumbering giant roles, right? Like, The Wolfman is the one role where he really got a chance to display a lot of emotion. This is him swinging for the fences here, and every time he reappears as Larry Talbot, he's bringing that same level of performance, right? It's a shame he didn't get more opportunities to play more complex characters over the course of his time at Universal,
Of all the monsters, he seems like the hardest to play. You have to be a good caliber actor for that. It's good to know it's always there that it took something like Mice and Men to sort of get recognized, but that's a great film. I remember that. Burgess Meredith, terrific, of course. One of many Batman connections that's going to come up tonight. But The Wolfman is a great display of his talent, Like, you get his terrific acting, but then his immense physicality as well.
Yeah, this is like Lon Chaney's greatest hits. Everything he's got up his sleeve, he brings out for The Wolfman. So I think that's one of the reasons I love this movie so much and why I really love Lon Chaney. So let's move into the production here. Now, Universal tapped George Wagner, a veteran director known for his ability to crank out fast and cheap thrillers, to produce and direct The Wolfman. And George really wanted to bring Universal horror back, those like grander roots from the early days. So he assembled a cast of familiar but reasonably priced talent, including previous Universal monster stars Bela Lugosi and Claude Rains, as well as Ralph Bellamy, Warren William, and Maria Uspensky.
Such a great cast. So terrific. It's just everybody is just killing it in this movie.
With the exception of Claude Rains, I don't think any of these actors really were like mega stars, but they're all very, very good.
Yeah. At this point, there seems to be some kind of respect for the material.
Yes.
Even with this director like wanting to bring it back, like it feels like it belongs in the pantheon of the original run, Like it does have that vibe.
Yes.
So one fact about the director that is great is that he directed 10 episodes of Batman 66, which just keeps coming up on this show. Alan Napier, right? From one of the Invisible Man movies. And I just find that so amusing how it just keeps coming up.
Yeah, the 60s Batman TV show has become sort of this side bit that we do. Because a lot of these actors are coming up, right, in their careers. And so it won't be long. It's almost 30 years before they land Batman. But, it just goes to show you how stacked Batman was when that hit television, yeah.
Right? And he did 10 episodes. I'm willing to do them for patrons. If you want to donate a substantial amount, we can work something out.
Yes. So The Invisible Man Returns screenwriter Curt Siodmak, of course, wrote the script from scratch, as we talked about. He chose to ignore Werewolf of London entirely, as well as Robert Florey's unfilmed werewolf script called The Wolfman. That had previously been developed for Boris Karloff and was just never made. And rather than take a scientific approach to lycanthropy, he instead drew inspiration from from established European folklore and developed a story based on the structure of classic Greek tragedy. But there were a few drafts of this, as there always are. I learned a couple things about some early versions of the script. In an early draft, Larry Talbot was an American engineer named Larry Gill who had traveled to Wales to install the telescope at Talbot Castle. The script also included things like a funeral sequence for Bella where his face was visible through the coffin, his eyes open, and a large pentagram prominently displayed on his forehead. With Larry being a visiting American and not the son of Sir John Talbot, there was significantly more tension between him and Frank Andrews, with Andrews even threatening to, quote, shoot Larry down like a dog.
Wow.
In that script, Larry even gives Andrews the silver bullet that would eventually kill him.
Oh, there's no bullet in this one. It's mentioned, but...
Yeah, I mean, they mention werewolves being vulnerable to silver, but we're not at silver bullet quite yet, although it was interesting to read that, you know, those wheels were turning in pre-production, and I'm not sure, I would love to figure out when the first use of a silver bullet to kill a werewolf was. It's not here, though.
This script is very interesting. It's sort of like a monster of past movies itself, because, like, the Talbots feel a lot like the Frankensteins, right?
Yes.
Like, they live in this big castle, like, above this small town and have all this money. Biting and transforming is a lot like the Dracula. It's familiar, but he found an interesting way to kind of mask it or like recontextualize it with the Larry character.
Another thing that was interesting about this early script is it was more ambiguous. And so it wasn't immediately clear that it was Larry who was the werewolf. That would become sort of a trend in the 40s. I'm sure you're familiar with Val Lewton. Val Lewton sort of ruled the 40s as a horror film producer, and a lot of his films took that approach. In Val Lewton's Wolfman, you wouldn't see the transformation, right? He would keep everything ambiguous until the end, until the big reveal.
Shutter Island is sort of an homage to Val Lewton via Scorsese. It's like Scorsese hasn't done a lot of horror, but that is sort of closest to he did that Cape Fear remake, but like Shutter Island kind of is in that same sort of flavor.
Right, and even I've seen the argument made that Cat People was a ripoff of the Wolfman. So who knows if that's true or not. But the original Wolfman could have been a lot more ambiguous. Even Larry might not even know that he was the Wolfman until the end of the movie. This early draft of the script included a moment where he's shot with the silver bullet and then stumbles over like a pool of water and sees his face in it and has that realization that he's been the Wolfman the whole time.
That's kind of interesting. I like him knowing, because he has to struggle with that when he's a human. He's got problems. Otherwise, he just sort of walk around as everyday, normal person or whatever. So it gives like good tension and conflict.
And another change that I do agree with as well was that in an early script, it was Sir John Talbot who killed Larry with the silver bullet. And then this was changed, of course, to the silver cane that Larry uses to kill Bella earlier in the movie. Having that moment mirrored at the beginning and the end just makes better sense than having his father kill him with a bullet.
Yeah, it's good, sort of bookends it very nicely, and it's still brutal. I mean, the father still has to destroy his own son.
There's something worse about having to, bludgeon him to death as opposed to shoot him.
Yeah, I'm surprised that no one had an issue with that, where they're like, well, if we want there to be some nice sort of poetic symmetry to this, he's going to have to really hit him a lot, and It's going to be more violent than him get shot off screen or something.
So now, with everything in place, The Wolfman began filming on October 27th, 1941, with a budget of $180,000. And I'll tell you what, this does not look like a movie with only a $180,000 budget.
No, this movie looks amazing.
Yeah.
They don't go overboard, but there's some cool, subtle matte paintings going on in the opening and set extension stuff.
Yeah, and as we'll get into, they recycled a lot of what they had already had on the lot, so they didn't really have to spend a lot of money on that stuff. I think a lot of the money here went towards obviously the cast, but then you've got a really great cinematography and art direction, so I think all the money went into that. They didn't have to build extravagant sets.
Prosthetics too, right? Unless Jack Pierce had some of those left over from the last attempt. But you're right, because there is some just gorgeous cinematography. Like the camera's really moving a lot in this movie. Like some really gorgeous tracking shots.
Okay, so let's get through the cast real quick. Of course, we have Bela Lugosi as Bella. He needs no introduction here on this show.
So good here.
So this is his last significant role within the Universal monsters. Like, I'm so glad to see him here because he does look great. I love the mustache. I love, just the whole sort of character. I like him playing, this is sort of like the anti-Dracula. As Dracula, he's very confident in his ability to be a vampire, right? He's very sort of almost proud of it. Here, he is terrified of what he might do to other people. And so I like seeing the other side of that.
Yeah, it's almost a cameo too, like almost but not. It's almost like that Psycho thing where I feel like, oh, people think Bella's here, he's going to be in the whole movie, and then it's like, oh, he's gone after the first reel. It's like, what's going to happen now if Bella's murdered right away?
Right, and I love the instinct to get rid of Bella and then have Maria Ouspenskaya kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting. If this movie had been made, I don't know, maybe 5 years earlier, it might have been the opposite, maybe. Who knows? But it's clear that Bella didn't have the same standing at Universal that he once had.
Yeah, and I love Maliva. I can't wait to talk more about her, too. She's kind of like the female Bella in a lot of ways. She's sort of serving that role that like I would expect him to be for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, oh, she's fantastic. Well, we'll get to her, but people would have known who she was at the time. She doesn't really stand out as a huge old-timey movie star for us in 2021, but she was prominent within a few years prior to this, so I think she would have been fresh in everybody's mind. Let's see, we got Claude Rains as Sir John Talbot, our Invisible Man, of course. By this time, Rains was the top character actor at Warner Brothers, and he was at the height of his career. Prior to The Wolfman, he had already made Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. That was in 1939, and then he would go on to make Casablanca the following year and get an Oscar nomination. He's like right at his peak right here.
He's fantastic. He's seriously probably one of my all-time favorite actors to watch, and this is such a great performance, such an interesting role. We'll talk more about this father and son dynamic.
Yeah.
But Claude Rains, man, he just brings it so much, this movie.
Yeah, and this is not a role that's particularly demanding. I don't think John Talbot is the most complicated character. He's not the most colorful. I'm not going to say he's not interesting because there's definitely a lot going on between him and his son. But it's so much more subtle than what I'm used to seeing from Claude Rains in terms of a performance. Like, we're almost seeing him reined in here a little bit.
Ooh, nice choice of words.
So I love seeing this sort of subtler performance from him.
Yeah, I think you just nailed it for me because the whole movie, I'm wondering what he knows. Like, I'm wondering what he's thinking, how much he knows, if he's ahead of the game or not, or just is a man that puts on that kind of air because of his distinguished position. Like, this man, kind of like I said about the Frankensteins, he sort of runs like this town in a lot of ways and like has all this sway and power. So I'm always sort of in the back of my head just wondering what he's thinking, and he just portrays that so well.
Now, we've got Ralph Bellamy as Colonel Paul Montford, pretty a big-name actor at this point. He had worked all through the 1930s. He had earned an Oscar nomination for his performance in 1937's The Awful Truth. In 1940, he appeared alongside Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell in His Girl Friday, and he would go on to have a lengthy career in movies and television, appearing in The Ghost of Frankenstein, as well as prominent roles in Rosemary's Baby, Trading Places, and his final film, Pretty Woman.
I couldn't believe, I didn't know watching the movie it was the same guy, but it's incredible to see like how far his career stretches. Like, could you imagine the set of Trading Places talk like John Landis? Like, maybe he hired him because he was Ralph Bellamy from The Wolfman. Like, who knows? But like, he must have been ecstatic to be like, I got a guy from The Wolfman in my movie.
When I realized this after the fact, I was like, wait, what? That guy was Randolph Duke?
And I like him in this. I like his character. Like, I thought he was pretty cool. He's the cop, right? Quote unquote. The constable.
Yeah, he's definitely got some great acting chops, and it's no surprise to me that he would go on to do these incredibly memorable films. So yeah, I think he's great here for sure. We got Warren William as Dr. Lloyd. I'm not really familiar with Warren William, but he was apparently an immensely popular actor in the 1930s. Like, he was known as the King of Pre-Code. He's probably most noteworthy for being the first actor to play Perry Mason, appearing as the famous lawyer in 1934's The Case of the Howling Dog, 35's The Case of the Curious Bride, The Case of the Lucky Legs, and 1936 is The Case of the Velvet Claws.
Wow.
Coincidentally, he did a series of movies where he played a reformed jewel thief, Michael Lanyard, aka the Lone Wolf, in 1940s The Lone Wolf Strikes, The Lone Wolf Meets a Lady, The Lone Wolf Keeps a Date, and The Lone Wolf Takes a Chance. Oh, and Secrets of the Lone Wolf, both in 1941 before landing his role in The Wolfman.
Oh, do you think that he was cast for the wrong movie? Like, do you think he thought this was another one of those? And they're like, wait a minute. Well, you're here. You want to do it? And he's like, of course, I'll be in this. Yeah, this looks amazing.
I did briefly have that thought. I'm not really familiar with Warren Williams prior to this. And when I looked at his credits and I saw all of these wolf titles in his filmography, like pre-Wolfman wolf titles. And then he played this character beyond the Wolfman, but they didn't have wolf in the title. So like this guy played this character, this reformed jewel thief, a bunch of times. I didn't do the count, but I'm kind of curious to see if he played that character more often than Basil Rathbone played Sherlock Holmes. But he unfortunately died from cancer in 1948, so the Wolfman was very near the end of his career. So we've got Maria Uspensky. We've already talked a little bit about her. She plays Maliva. She was a Russian stage actor who came to America in 1922. She lived in New York City, where she founded the School of Dramatic Art. She had appeared in a few silent Russian films, but had largely stayed away from Hollywood. When her school's financial problems forced her to look for extra income, she began working on American films. She moved to Hollywood. She opened up another acting school in Los Angeles. So she received 2 Oscar nominations in the 1930s. I had mentioned she would have been familiar to audiences, right? She received one of those Oscars for the William Wyler film Dodsworth in 1936, which was one of the briefest performances to ever receive a nomination. And she earned the other Oscar nomination for 1939's Love Affair, starring Charles Boyer. She would eventually go on to reprise her role of Maliva in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, so we will be seeing her again.
Awesome.
We've got Evelyn Ankers as Gwen Conliffe. Okay, so she looked familiar to me, and we will see her again, but she worked with Lon Chaney a lot. Apparently, she was known as Queen of the Bees. She appeared in many B movies over the course of her career, frequently opposite Lon Chaney Jr. In addition to The Wolfman, her credits for Universal include The Ghost of Frankenstein, Son of Dracula, and The Invisible Man's Revenge. Now, I limited it to just Universal monster movies, but if you look at her filmography, she has done a ton of these sci-fi horror B movies.
All right.
She made over 50 films between 1936 and 1950 before retiring from movies at the age of 32 to be a housewife.
Yeah, there's some good titles here. The Mad Ghoul, Tarzan's Magic Fountain, The Lone Wolf in London. I mean, I don't know if that's a horror movie, but some cool titles on her resume.
For sure. Let's see, we got Patrick Knowles as Frank Andrews. That was a role originally intended for The Mummy's Hand star Dick Ferran, but Ferran was replaced just a week before filming started. So Patrick Knowles, I didn't really know a whole lot about him either, but he is noteworthy for having been hired by Warner Brothers as a threat to Errol Flynn. What they didn't realize was the two were very friendly with each other.
Oh, well. He was another Robin Hood alum. I wonder if he had any stories to share with Claude Rains catching up on the set.
Yeah. We've got Faye Helm as Jenny Williams. Not much going on there. She had a couple supporting roles, never really had any starring roles. But we've got Forrester Harvey, who we have seen before. He plays Twiddle here, but we know him as Una O'Connor's husband in The Invisible Man.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you caught him. Did you recognize him?
Yeah, because smartly and tactfully, he is most of the comedy in this movie. He is just the right amount, just the right type of character, and sort of leads into the town folk and all that. And I think he's terrific here.
This movie doesn't have quite the amount of James Whale comedy.
Oh no. It's very grim, but not entirely, which was very smart. Because the last movie we watched was only comedy. There was no horror. That didn't turn out too well.
But we have Forrester Harvey bringing a little bit of that sort of James Whale comedy here, just sort of representing the working man, right?
Yeah, it might just be that Universal's comedy or whatever at this point. It just seems to be when they try to inject comedy, they look at James Whale's and try to replicate that as best as possible.
Now, as was the case with Son of Frankenstein, art director Jack Otterson received the credit for this film's visual style, but much of the work was actually done by a man named Robert Boyle, who would go on to receive 4 Oscar nominations for his work on North by Northwest, Gaily Gaily, Fiddler on the Roof, and The Shootist. He even claimed that Hitchcock hired him specifically because of his work on The Wolfman.
You can get a lot of mileage out of a smoke machine.
You sure can.
But it's gorgeous. This movie is beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. So I have a quote here. When Robert Boyle was discussing his work on The Wolfman, he said, "I think Universal was quite varied, with a larger amount of their output being in these so-called, quote, horror pictures, but they were also doing a lot of comedies, cheap ones like Abbott and Costello. The Wolfman Mansion was for the most part a standing set, but it had to be rearranged for the needs of this particular project. They gave us stage 12, a huge area to cover, but very little money. I was looking for material for this forest. Someone told me that in the San Fernando Valley there was this grove of walnut trees being torn down to make room for a subdivision. So he arranged for those trees to be torn down and shipped to LA. And then he said, quote, we trucked them into Universal and on the stage. They were all bare of foliage, so I painted them black to make them stand out and look ominous. Then I put a shine on them. We must have had at least 30 trees. It was Universal's largest stage. The forest covered an area of maybe 100 by 200 feet. It was big. I decided to use a lot of fog, sort of a ground fog cover, to cover up a lot of the inadequacies of the actual built stuff. We built the gypsy camp on the same set as the forest. We built the gypsy wagon, and then others we rented and found, but we built a lot of that gypsy camp. A traveling carnival, really." End quote.
Amazing. That forest, it looks like it's inked.
It
you
does.
know, like it looks like it's inked. Like it's gorgeous. Like his whole ambiance, like his mise en scene is just terrific. And yeah, I want to go back and see what else this guy has shot or what he shot after. I mean, even if it's not horror, like it's the kind of look like this that makes me interested in a guy's kind of body of work or something.
Yeah, the thing that's really great here is particularly those forest scenes. Like the contrast is what makes this movie work so well. And I think back, like when I see it and I think back to the past couple movies, I think about how kind of flat they look. Now the Frankenstein films tend to not have that issue so much, but I think they could have benefited from having Robert Boyle work on them. But I just love the way this movie looks. I don't know how to articulate it more clearly.
I think it might be the gloss, you know what I'm saying? Like that could be part of it, not just as like a term of like he has like a certain sort of edge to his style, but like didn't you say like he physically was painting these trees and things like you don't normally hear that kind of stuff. Like I think it's the movie Rumblefish where Coppola shot it in black and white and the tree wasn't casting the shadow he wanted on a house, so they literally painted on the house a black shadow of the tree and stuff. You know, like it takes a mind to kind of like work that out and how it's going to look on screen versus how it is when you're shooting it and everything. So yeah, it's just really cool.
Right, and they had to redress that set multiple times because we have multiple forest sequences. So, I mean, they had that 100 by 200 foot space, but I'm assuming what they probably did was just to make it look like a different section of the forest, they would just like rotate the trees or just move them a little bit. They're recycling all these trees over and over and over, but just by moving them a little bit, you know, you get a whole different section of the forest. So simple technique, but just the ingenuity behind it is so impressive to me.
They just really know how to fill the screen well too. Stuff like you were saying about kind of like that carnival, which I thought was the funeral for Bella, maybe kind of doubles as the celebration, whatever, or something. Right. But it looks like the size of a Renaissance fair at times, right? But you're like, you can't be that big. It's just the ingenuity of how they shot it and where they put everything. It's just like really well thought out. So like it gives such a great illusion.
Now, I don't want to move on from the visual style without mentioning cinematographer Joseph A. Valentine, who was another person who went on to work with Hitchcock. So this was his one and only Universal monster film, but you'll like this. He went on to shoot Saboteur, Shadow of a Doubt, and Rope.
Oh, wow. Rope. That is considered sort of one of the one-take movies.
Right.
Like, I mean, there's hidden cuts, right? Yeah. But, like, that movie is technically just remarkable. So crazy how, like, Hitchcock was sort of poaching, you know, a little bit from Universal. Was it? Well, he was at Universal. At Universal anyway. Yeah, you know, like Psycho. I love to think about. Can we do Psycho, Dan? Like, Can we add Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates to the list or something? There's 4 of those movies. But it's cool how everybody's sort of crossing over like that, you know? I really dig that.
And I love seeing John Fulton's name pop up in a Hitchcock movie, too. He was over there at Universal doing all the visual effects. So, like I said, they were sort of recycling sets and whatnot. They utilized the Notre Dame set from the 1923 Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Oh, weird.
Right? So, Lon Chaney Jr. had a few scenes right on the same set that his dad was on, like, almost 20 years prior.
Wow, that had to have been very emotional.
Right?
That's such a huge Guinness record fact in my mind right now, like how that isn't on the back of the box. You know, like, damn, I wish I knew that more than I knew Lon Chaney's true first name, you know?
Well, you should go back and at least rewatch those scenes, because it might be difficult to know that that's the same cathedral. What they did was they avoided all of the long shots of the exteriors, because in reality, that set was really too big for like a small Welsh town church. So they really just used like little pieces of it. And I think it works pretty well. Like I never really got the impression that that church was too big for that town. So as far as I'm concerned, they were successful there.
Yeah, and for some reason I always just felt like the church was maybe one of the bigger structures in a town in general back then, even though we're not that far. I'm not sure when this movie takes place exactly, but it seems like modern day. It seems like 1940 to me. We're just in a whole other country, so I just figured that it's a very old country. The church is probably the biggest building in the little town, and, you know, I didn't really cross my mind too much.
It's funny that you say that, because Universal did, and Curt Siodmak, you know, they all kind of worked together to make this one sort of a fairy tale, much like Frankenstein, where there are familiar elements and then there are fantastical elements. It's not really set in any particular time. It's not even really set in a specific town. I've read that this is set in Wales, but they never mention Wales in the story, or in the movie rather. So it is sort of meant to be out of time and kind of a fairy tale.
Cool.
So we've got Jack Pierce, of course, doing the Wolfman makeup. As we discussed on our Werewolf of London episode, his original designs for Henry Hull were scrapped in favor of a more minimal werewolf look, but those original designs were brought back and repurposed here for Lon Chaney. Universal publicity department made a huge deal about all of this makeup, claiming that Pierce had traveled to Europe and spent 5 years researching descriptions and illustrations of werewolves, which probably an exaggeration.
Maybe. But that's what you did, right? You had to drum up some sensational press.
At this point, Jack Pierce's name would have been known probably to the public. You know, the man who created Frankenstein, the man who created the Mummy, and so on. So I think he was probably a name that you could put out in a press release and people would know, oh, wow, we got more incredible Jack Pierce makeup. Cool, let's go see that movie. When he was describing his process to a reporter, Pierce described the challenges of having to create a monster. And he said, quote, when he, the producer, tells you to come up with a couple of werewolves, so you try to do some research. All you learn about werewolves is that they're supposed to howl in the light of the moon in the deserted castles of Scotland. Nobody's ever seen one. So you sit down and you try to figure out how a werewolf ought to look. And then you go to work with hair and putty and glue and paint. So really, if he actually spent 5 years researching werewolves, I would say he mostly came home empty-handed. And just kind of had to figure it out.
I love the Wolfman, don't get me wrong or anything, but he's kind of like Dog Boy, right. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's cool. Like, that's cool enough. But like, to say that he traveled the world to land on this design is that's just like pure sensationalism. Like, that's just marketing or whatever. It's like, no, he looked at a dog, probably looked at a wolf, looked at a lion, looked at like all the big cats and dogs, and then looked at like Lon Chaney and said like, right. What are we gonna do?
So the finished product, which involved yak hair, multiple prosthetics, and sharp jutting teeth, and had to be applied to Chaney's face, hands, and feet, took somewhere between 4 and 6 hours to apply.
Whoa, that's way less than I was expecting. Maybe Jack Pierce was just better at applying stuff at this point in his career.
The script included 2 full transformations, and in one scene, Chaney had to lie on the ground while the makeup was slowly removed for his transformation from wolf to man. And according to Chaney, getting the makeup off was worse than putting it on, since that final transformation... I remembered seeing his face change from man to wolf in this, but rewatching it, I realized I'm thinking of something else, a future Wolfman movie. But so the full transformation we get here is from wolf to man. And when they were shooting that, it it took not 2 full days, but it did take 2 days to shoot that because they had to have him lay still and remove a little bit of the makeup, shoot, go to the dressing room or the makeup room, have more makeup taken off. He'd go back, lay down, they'd shoot some more. And so to get that gradual effect, it took the better part of the first day and then the morning of the second day to complete that transformation.
Wow. Well, I appreciate it. I'm surprised they didn't use the shot twice for a transformation into a man into wolf. Somehow figure out a way to purpose it earlier in the film as well. But I love how it references the Invisible Man ending. But it's also funny how, like, to execute that same shot is very different for the characters. The Invisible Man, he just has to sort of dissolve on screen, whereas like we're doing this idea with the Wolfman, all right, he's just gonna lay there and transform back. It's gonna take us like 48 hours to accomplish this. Holy crap.
And Chaney had to do that at the end of the day after he had shot a bunch of scenes in his full makeup. Then he had to like lay down and spend hours having all that makeup taken off. In addition to Jack Pierce's makeup, we also have special effects wizard John P. Fulton, who I mentioned previously. He was on board here for Larry Talbot's nightmarish hallucination sequence.
Oh, I love it.
Right?
So cool. So unexpected.
That's really all this movie required as far as special effects. I think it's really effective. We see this sort of thing all the time now. But I love this particular sequence here. It's just wonderful.
I've been going through a lot of comics lately, and it's like got that sort of language to it. And I know we've sort of referenced comics in the past and such and stuff like that, but like just such a graphic design to that sequence and the imagery with the hypnotic kind of nature of the graphics and stuff. And I forgot we're going to go diving into his mind through his subconscious at one point in this film.
Yep. So we've got a score, rich in gypsy melodies and effective action cues, composed by Hans J. Salter and Frank Skinner. I learned it was actually Curt Siodmak's idea to use the Welsh folk song Men of the Hallock over the opening titles. Like, Curt Siodmak is popping up in all sorts of places here. I really didn't expect him to have that much influence, but like the more I read, the more I like just learned, he's just all over this movie. I love this score here. Hans Salter and Frank Skinner did a great job. And of course, like, this music would get repurposed later on in other films. If you get a chance to listen to it by itself, it's wonderful.
Yeah, like I really appreciated the score too, that it was fresh and new music, and it's like you say, you could tell it's a great score because it's going to be used over and over again. It's going to get pillaged. But also, about Siodmak, like, it's just a guy who I feel like has a vision, and it's weird to kind of say that, but I feel like not since like James Whales has someone like kind of understood the material so well, or at least like has his own kind of grip on it and knows what he wants, and they do their best to execute all that. So I love when a writer or director or whatever is allowed or encourages, let's use this music, even to today, like, let's use that, or like, even though you're not supposed to, like, you write it into your script sometimes, like, this scene plays out over this song or whatever. So that was cool.
I'm not sure I've ever seen a screenwriter this involved with a production before. Usually it's the writer who, submits their script. It gets hacked up by everybody else, and then by the end of it, it's barely their script, but their name slapped on it.
I'm of two minds about it. Like, on the one hand, I want to believe that they just had so much sort of faith in the guy, and like, they just loved what he was coming up with so much. But maybe on the other hand, he was like, he could just, be the fall guy if this doesn't work out or something. Right. Like, it was all his idea. Like, he came up with that.
This production was not a complete shit show like we've seen before, but it was not without its behind-the-scenes drama. I read about a few things that are worth mentioning. So Lon Chaney and Evelyn Ankers famously did not get along off-screen, which I thought was strange because their chemistry here is so good.
Yeah, and I've only heard that Lon Chaney Jr. is like a gentle giant everywhere from everybody.
That's kind of what I heard too. Now, according to Evelyn Ankers, Universal was so happy with her at the time that they had given her her own dressing room. And on the first day of shooting The Wolfman, Lon approached her and said, quote, "So you're the girl who swiped my dressing room." Now, it's tough to know how to read this, but this really set the tone for their relationship going forward. What actually was going on, like, that dressing room was not his, but my understanding is that that dressing room was where he and his buddies would get drunk.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that space had been taken away from him. Now, if you're not aware, Lon Chaney was a famous alcoholic. He was hitting the bottle all the time. So it's possible that just in the moment when he realized that he didn't have his little hiding spot to go get wasted, and like he met the girl who was now living in that dressing room, he might have said something a little unsavory.
I hear you. I could definitely see how like that could be taken the wrong way or presented as sort of more than just like a snide comment or something like that.
Right.
Interesting. We're not really off on the right foot here.
No. Chaney was also a very big practical joker.
Oh, would you say he was maybe the George Clooney of his era? Notorious Hollywood prankster George Clooney.
Possibly. He would often creep up on Evelyn Ankers while in full makeup and just scare the shit out of her. Needless to say, they just had very little use for each other. We weren't there, so we really don't have any idea what it was like to experience these moments. But like everything that I've heard about Lon Chaney, like is that he was this really nice guy. He certainly wasn't a big star on The Wolfman yet, so I can't imagine him having this inflated ego. I just don't see it. But of course, we don't know the full context, so...
True, yeah, and it's called acting, so like they're
Right.
both just great actors that get along on screen because that's their job, and they don't have to get along off screen if they can't, but yeah, that's too bad to hear.
To their credit, as professionals, I totally buy their chemistry here, and it made me sad to learn that they were not fans of each other.
Yeah, it's not really like the easiest kind of start to their relationship either.
No.
There's sort of like for me a hump that they have to clear. And I give Evelyn Ankers like all the credit in the world to play it as naturally and honestly as possible.
For sure. So there was a huge bear on set. Apparently there was a scene
What?
where, yes. So for that sort of carnival scene, there was a bear that Lon Chaney was supposed to like fight.
As the Wolfman? Like, was the bear gonna get loose?
No.
Okay.
No, he wasn't gonna like wrestle the Wolfman. He was gonna wrestle Lon Chaney. From what I understand of the context of this scene, that the sort of werewolf instincts were gonna take over briefly, and Lon was gonna like volunteer because it was like hey, who wants to wrestle this bear? Lon was going to volunteer.
Yeesh.
Yeah, so the scene was ultimately cut out of the movie, and I'm really glad it was. But the bear got loose and chased Evelyn Ankers up into the rafters.
Oh man, that's the worst. That's a very strange scene to have in the movie. Like, I'm glad it's not there, but I wish there was a bit more of like animals freaking out. We only really get the one scene with the dog.
Yes.
I just wish that like birds were like diving down and taking shots at him or something. I don't know. Maybe not that, but like I wish there was just a bit more of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was ultimately the goal of that scene, was to show the bear kind of like freaked out by this man. But I don't love the idea of Larry as a man fighting animal impulses. I kind of like keeping the two characters separate, the Larry and the Wolfman.
Plus, it's too on the nose.
Yeah, that's true too. While shooting the finale, Claude Rains got so caught up in the moment while bludgeoning his werewolf son to death with a 10-pound silver-headed cane that he gave Lon Chaney a black eye, caused a great deal of swelling, and probably gave him a concussion. So Chaney's remaining scenes that day were postponed, and he was sent home to recuperate.
Oh, so he did get to do some stunt work after all. Like,
yes.
I was not imagining that they were like in the same area together, right? Like I figured that was just shot and stitched together.
Yeah, no, they were definitely involved together in that scene. And I learned that silver tip of the cane was made of rubber. So, like, I think at some point, whoever made the prop had anticipated that this would be used as a weapon. I mean, it's in the script that Larry kills the wolf with it. Presumably, they would have maybe figured that Claude Rains would have to use it as a weapon. So they went ahead and just made it made of rubber. But at the same time, I don't care if it's a rubber tip or not. It's going to hurt.
Yeah, I just figured it could have been rubber because, like, silver's expensive for,
also
you
that,
know?
Yeah.
But, like, you're right. Like, if you're making a prop that you know is going to be used on a human, you want to make it a fake or something, yeah.
Now, production wrapped on The Wolfman on November 25th, and the film was rushed through post-production so it could be screened for the press in early December. Like, the turnaround on this was insane. At this time in history, a somewhat minor event involving the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor shook the entire country. Universal became understandably concerned about this absolutely horrifying news affecting the movie-going public's appetite for their manufactured horror. Variety even labeled The Wolfman, quote, dubious entertainment in light of grim world events. Fortunately for Universal, The Wolfman was a box office smash despite middling reviews from critics. And, today we celebrate it as one of the all-time classics. I mean, what do you do when you're about to release your hit new monster movie and, Pearl Harbor happens?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it kind of reminds me around the time of like 9/11, and people were like, well, like, are we going to release this movie? Are we going to delay it? Are we going to even make this movie anymore? Right? And so it's just sort of, on one hand, you need a distraction, right?
Right.
I mean, on the other hand, you need to be involved and get involved, of course, pay attention, but like you also need like that art and that entertainment to occupy the other parts of your mind, or else like if you don't have that, you just go insane.
Like we've talked about other Universal monster movies that came out like as things were ramping up in Europe and Hitler was coming to power and the Nazi party was in full swing.
Or even in the Depression, during the Depression era, right? Like kind of where they originated. Yeah.
But what I mean is like we talk about how Universal tended to lean more into sort of comedy, sort of more lighthearted horror films.
Right.
Like in the late 30s and early 40s. So this is not that. This is like full swing horror. And so like this is not the sort of movie that people are going to go to and laugh and sort of forget about what's happening or what just happened in Hawaii, right? Like this is going to be horror on top of horror. So like I fully understand Universal's point of view here. I'm just glad that The Wolfman didn't get lost because of real world news. That could have absolutely happened.
It's a very interesting discussion that I've never considered, and because I didn't realize when the movie was released. But if you even think about the film, like it's about an American who goes overseas and dies.
Yeah.
Why would you make this movie during the war where Americans are going, might be going overseas and dying and stuff? You're right. Like it could be a little like, it could seem like they could be a little more tactful, maybe, and maybe hold it or whatever, or like, it's just unfortunate. The timing is just bad, I guess.
The Wolfman is just heavy. I think about, to kind of bring the conversation back to comic books, I think of comic book movies, modern comic book movies, as being very fun, right? What Marvel has really been able to do is like make these movies that are very, very fun. Now, you have X-Men who exist in the same universe, and X-Men movies are always like, I just don't have fun watching them. And it's because the stories are inherently about oppression and much heavier themes, and like it makes sense. I'm not watching X-Men movies with a big smile on my face most of the time for that reason. And so it's interesting that Universal would go ahead and release a heavy movie, because like every time we see the Wolfman from here on out, like from this and every other movie, even if he's in a comedy, Larry Talbot is the most depressing character that Universal has in their stable of characters. And so I'm still just baffled that this movie came out after Pearl Harbor and was still such a big success, because like I said, he's the ultimate sad boy.
I was thinking as you were speaking, it's very interesting, like all these sort of things are popping into my head that I didn't really consider until we just mentioned Pearl Harbor. But the movie itself is very much about like the duplicity of man, right? The struggle between war and peace and good and bad. And the other movie that jumps to my mind immediately with that theme is Full Metal Jacket, which is like this intense, one of the seminal Vietnam movies and maybe war movies of all time. And even Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like these are themes of like man warring with themselves within is very much, I feel like, the metaphor for the larger theater of war going on in the world at times too. Again, like, were they trying to say that kind of thing, or is it just because of world events that stuff is lining up in that direction?
Yeah.
But this movie, even though it's very dark and maybe you could say it's depressing, even though it's extremely entertaining and I love watching it and everything, like it might be what the public needs at the time to sort of be like, let's not be this sad sack. Let's get out there and fight or whatever. Like, let's go kill the Nazi Wolfman or something.
I just think about what audiences had come to expect from Universal Horror up to this point.
It's a total seesaw, right? Like
You
it
know what I
is a
mean?
complete and total. Like we went from, phase one, right, which was very dark, straight horror stuff. It had its light moments, but you know what I mean. We have like we're setting up the icons, and then we had this phase two where it's like, things are getting way too funny here, But now we've slingshotted right back to the beginning again. It could just be that the pattern of sensibilities has come around again full circle and is just not really lining up appropriately with what's happening in the rest of the world, but it's just the way that things have sort of come around.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though. I wish we could go on for like another hour and a half just about this, but I think it's a different episode.
Yeah, for sure. At the end of the day, this is the movie that made Lon Chaney a certified horror star. And just a fun fact before we get into the movie, I read somewhere that after The Wolfman, Lon Chaney received more fan mail than anybody else on the Universal lot. This movie wasn't just a success. Like, people fucking love The Wolfman. It's easy to understand why in retrospect.
It feels like one of those movies that's been staring you in the face for years, and it's just like, how come I haven't been made, right? It's like one of those ideas that just seems like, why have you done this before me?
Yeah.
It just feels like finally he made it to the party. Like, it's so good.
Okay, so let's start the movie. We, of course, open up with the Universal logo and that great Superman style music.
Every time, every single time.
I'm looking forward to when they change it. I think it'll change at least once before we're done with the show here. I don't know. I don't want to look and cheat. I want to be surprised by it when it comes, but I'm pretty sure we get one change.
I constantly forget that Universal makes other movies and that this goes in front of those too. So it's not just whatever's happening in this series that dictates, the opening banner or whatever.
But we get a really great opening credit sequence. The title card, obviously, super great. I love that sort of hairy looking font they use for the title. But then we get this opening credit sequence, which we have not seen before. In fact, no other Universal horror film did opening credits like this, with the exception of The Black Cat.
Oh, now let me ask you this, Dan. Have you ever seen another movie with an opening credit sequence quite like this that you can just that jumps to mind? Because I don't think I have, really. This is very cool. You usually get this at the end. This is usually a curtain call.
Yeah, that was my note, is that this very much reads like an end credit sequence, but we get it up top. And I can't think of another film where you get these sort of clips of the movie you're about to see introducing all of the stars. I cannot think of one. I would love for people to write in, if you know of something that we're not thinking of, please tell us.
I very much appreciated it because I kind of wish more movies let me know the names of the characters before the movie starts, so that I guess an easier way of following along. That's kind of what I love about jumping onto the internet sometimes and being like, what are their names before I start this movie, especially with this show, because I just want to be sure that I can follow everyone.
Yeah, I mean, this is like TV sitcom credits.
Great call. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. You're so right.
You would definitely see this on TV. I mean, if you were to play "Thank You for Being a Friend" over these credits, it might give the film an entirely different vibe.
Or Gilligan's Island, exactly. Yeah.
But what I find interesting is that Lon Chaney Jr. is credited simply as Lon Chaney here. The movie proper starts with that push in on the encyclopedias and the little entry on lycanthropy. I love that because it really emphasizes the storybook kind of fairy tale thing going on with this movie. The capitalized legend and Talbot Castle, and we're about to be transported into another world that looks like ours but isn't.
Yeah, it reminds me sort of silent era to a degree too, where you'll get a title card maybe, but it's a great way to set something up without really being exposition. You're going to figure this all out throughout the movie, but it's just kind of this cool opening imagery. And you're right, it reminds me of a Disney thing where someone would put a book off a shelf and start opening it and reading it, and then it would turn into an animation. Then the movie is off and running or something like that too. So kind of a cool sort of twist on that in my mind.
And so we move into the next scene here. Larry is being escorted back to his childhood home, Talbot Castle, and we are introduced, of course, to Larry. We are introduced to his father, Sir John. I love the height difference here. If there's one thing that doesn't really work about this casting, it's that I don't know that I believe Claude Rains as Lon Chaney's dad.
Right? They'll drop some kind of line later in the movie about maybe what side of the family he's from more or less, but I wish we got a painting of his mother. We
Right.
never really get a shot of her. From the looks of it, his brother, he's home because his brother died. And we see a painting of his brother, which looks remarkably like Larry. Are they twins? He doesn't have another brother who's like kind of Joe Pesci sized or anything like that running around?
No, so we we established that relationship, and as Lon makes his way back into his home, he meets Paul Montford, who they used to, quote, snitch apples together. So an old childhood friend of Larry's who has now become like sort of the chief law enforcement officer of this little hamlet.
Yeah, he's like the burgomaster.
Yeah, he's really just there to be introduced because he immediately leaves. So we know like he's going to come into play at some point. He was in the opening credits. He's introducing himself here. And so now Paul's a cop. And we get the sense here that Larry's been away for quite some time. Sir John will say in this scene that Larry's been gone for about 18 years.
That's a long time, right? That's a long time. It's just like one of those like prodigal son returns kind of situations where like, did he leave under some sort? It doesn't seem like he left under any kind of bad terms. Him and his dad, it feels like they're going to be getting along for most of the movie.
Yeah, well, so what's happening is that Larry was the second son of the Talbot family, of this Talbot family. So sort of like the royal family, when you're not first in line, that being the second son kind of sucks, right? You just fuck around and you do whatever you want. We saw Prince Harry spend a great deal of time doing that before he sort of matured, and now he's doing what he's doing now. But so I think for Larry, it was just kind of like, okay, I'm the second son of this very important family. I'm not really necessary because my brother is going to inherit everything. What do I go do? And so he goes to America and he learns a trade, which we're going to learn in the next scene or in a couple scenes. But he's been sort of estranged for quite some time, almost 20 years.
Interesting how this is kind of paralleling Lon Chaney Jr. and his father, where it's like they were sort of estranged. He went off and learned a trade before becoming an actor.
Yeah, it's like neither Larry Talbot or Lon Chaney were expected to become what they eventually become.
Right. To carry on the line.
But they both find themselves in that position. In Larry's case, I can't tell if there's a reluctance there. I think he's kind of like thrown off a bit. Like, okay, now this is my responsibility. What am I going to do?
Yeah, he seems into it. Like, he's willing to give it all a chance. Like, he's not put off by it. His disposition seems rather cheerful, right? Like, he's going to help fix his dad's telescope. He seems pretty useful. Like, he's down to sort of be around and help out.
But there's definitely some apprehension there because as we'll get into it, you know, he's been away for so long. He doesn't really know these people. Like, I get the sense that the Talbot family is sort of ruling this little section of Wales.
Yeah, it's so strange, right? It does feel like that for some reason they're like the governors. It feels like very Star Wars in that way, right? Where they go to some weird backwater planet and there's a governor running like a very small sort of outpost. He could either be kind or he could be mean, and like we're not sure. And it's like, do we have to call the Jedis or can we just, live peacefully here and everything? It kind of had that kind of situation going, but he's like a nice guy.
Yeah, it's very similar to the Frankenstein arrangement, except we're not calling him Baron Talbot. He's just Sir John Talbot.
Yeah, so he probably just a wealthy landowner that owns all the land that all the houses are on, and they all pay him the rent, and it's up to him to make sure that the land is prosperous. Yeah.
And Sir John mentions that they've been in charge for some 300 years. The Talbots, So this is a lot for Larry to come home to, right? His brother is dead, and now he is next in line to take over this whole village. But for now, we get establishing the relationship, right? And again, kind of estranged. But I love the chemistry here. Just based on performances, I do buy this father-son relationship. It's really just the physical parts of it that kind of throw me a bit.
Yeah, same.
We don't get details on how Larry's brother died. We don't even get his name, I don't think. We just sort of breeze through all that detail. And Larry is not reluctant, but he is apprehensive, if maybe a little bit excited for what's to come.
Speculation on how his brother might have died?
Yeah, go for it.
The wolf got him?
It's possible. I mean, I think in the 2010 Wolfman, the Benicio del Toro Wolfman.
Yeah.
I think that's heavily implied that the brother was killed by the werewolf, which, spoiler alert, ends up being his own father.
We get the awesome double wolf battle.
The wolf fight, yeah. We will definitely get to that at some point.
Awesome.
But yeah, so we don't really get any of the details. I guess it's not really entirely necessary, but we can infer that maybe the werewolf got him.
Hey, Dan, this movie's like an hour. So like
Right.
we're gonna be breezing through a lot of details, and we're gonna be repeating a lot of dialogue, and
That's right.
it's just gonna,
Yeah, for how short and mostly efficient it is kind of funny how much does get repeated over the course of this hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah, Maleva has like 10 lines and says like 5 of them twice.
Yep. So the next scene is the telescope scene. And this is, like, I have to believe this was a holdover from the original Larry Gill script. And they just decided to work it in. Like, Larry Talbot had picked up some sort of trade while he was in the United States. And so this scene doesn't amount to a whole lot. Like you said, it doesn't reveal like a full moon. Like, there's none of it is really used to advance this story. This scene is really just to expand on the father-son relationship and also what might be the worst thing about this movie.
Oh, you mean this peeping Tom? Like this George McFly over here?
Yes. So as much as I love this movie, this is the one kind of sequence I cannot defend to anybody. And when I watch this with women, like I watched this with my girlfriend, and like she's like, this is the creepiest thing. And whenever I recommend this movie to people, I have to be like, look, there's this one moment where Larry is kind of creepy. It's not really defensible, but the movie doesn't really seem to make much of it. Like once they move past it, it's done. So try to ignore it. But yeah, this is the one thing that I think keeps the movie from becoming like a 5-star movie.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing, and like it's the most unnecessary thing considering like we're on a time crunch here, and like we could be spending this talking about like constellations with the telescope and
Yeah.
like the pentagram or whatever. Like we could be foreshadowing things about wolf stuff, and instead he is just being like this pervy guy. They could have just as easily bumped into each other on the street and been like, "Oh, hey, what's your name? Oh, my name's Larry." Like, and it would have been way better than what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that remotely saves this is the fact that Lon Chaney is playing the character in a very sort of harmless, innocent way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we as the audience know that he is on the level, right? But we have to also view this scene from Gwen's perspective, and like, it's creepy behavior.
I don't know that we've outlined exactly what we're talking about yet, but Larry kind of, he's testing out the telescope, and he's sort of looking around town, and he sees an open window, and Gwen is like, it seems like she has just finished getting dressed, but he has a clear view through her bedroom window and watches her for quite some time. It's great. We learned that she lives across the street above like an antique store or whatever, but like that's the really important stuff. But no, like he is just peering in on her for way too long.
Yeah, so I think the only thing that makes this even remotely okay is the fact that Lon is playing this with a sort of boyish innocence. But from Gwen's perspective, that is like the ultimate gross kind of creepy behavior. If I were her, I would want no parts of this guy.
He's very pushy too, we'll get there, but like he tries to force this date on her and everything, and it would have played better without this scene. I'll just say
Yeah,
that.
I feel like I would have been okay with the sort of persistence when he's in the antique shop trying to get a date if he hadn't done that. Because he does seem to genuinely like her, and she's very charming for sure. I think what I love most, or, I say this sort of ironically, but like, he doesn't even pretend really what he's done. He sort of plays it off as a joke. Like, he gives away that he's been spying through her window, but plays it off as that he's like a fortune teller, or he's a mind reader. And I'm like, why would you bring up any of that? Because now he's got to explain it. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think in the end it was just a very strained attempt at humor and to try and kind of set up this first act to be way more innocent because there's going to be a lot of horror coming up in this one.
True.
Like there has not, it's like, I was like, oh, maybe there's not, but like, compared to the last few movies, like we are there, like we are back in the thick of it. Like it is lots of screams, lots of shrieks, lots of dead bodies, lots of funerals and stuff. Like, yeah. So I was just like, oh, they're not doing a very great job of it, but they're trying to be like light and playful and sort of like, romantic comedy at the beginning here.
Yeah, I definitely think that was the case. I just wish they had handled it differently, because to watch this through a modern lens, it really stands out as kind of gross. But in any case,
I was thinking too in the back of my head, I was like, oh, is his dad gonna use this telescope to like find out information? Like, is he spying on people? Like, what's he thinking?
yeah, so the telescope serves no other purpose beyond this scene. That's it.
Exactly. That's it. Bye, telescope.
So we get the beginnings of this relationship between Larry and Gwen, and it's a little bit awkward, but we establish a few things. We get Larry getting his cane. She's just trying to, I think, get him out of the store by just finding something he likes so he'll buy it and get out. But by the end of this scene, I do kind of get the impression that she is playing a little bit hard to get, kind of likes him, but she's also with somebody, so she's not serious,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she's engaged. That's right. The return of the love triangle.
Right.
I forgot. Yeah. But we also get a couple hints of werewolf lore. She knows a little thing or two.
Yes, we do. We're about 10 minutes in, and Larry has chosen his cane. It's the silver-tipped cane with the wolf. She explains sort of the legend of the werewolf, and we get, for the first time, even a man who is pure in heart, and so on and so forth. Really, this poem is repeated, I think, 3 times in about 5 minutes.
No joke, it's the Silver Shamrock song from Halloween 3.
Yes, it is.
It's so funny.
She establishes that a werewolf, or a person who is afflicted with lycanthropy, will see a pentagram in the palm of the person who will be their next victim. Which, has that really stuck as a werewolf trope?
I don't know. I haven't seen that recently, but I like that because it's like literal foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Like there's something fun about that in a cinematic sense.
Right.
Okay, that might not play too well practically or whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought that was cool. Also, what I'm finally able to drop this, Dan. They're talking werewolf left and right. They're not really saying Wolfman too much here, so I just have to drop it. You're one or the other. It doesn't matter if you're standing up straight or if you're on all fours. You can call yourself whatever you want.
I thought about that the entire time watching this movie, because I know when we were talking Werewolf of London, you were just like, there's a werewolf and there's a wolf man. And in this movie, we get a straight up wolf. Bella is represented as a wolf, whereas Larry Talbot is a wolf man who stands on his 2 feet. So this sort of does away with any theory that you might have that there's difference between werewolves and wolfman.
Yeah, or any care, too. I just don't care.
Yeah.
I just kind of thought it would be cool if there was, a distinction, but there doesn't need to be.
Right. With Larry kind of pushing his 8 o'clock date with Gwen, we see the gypsies arrive in town. We get Maria Ospinskaya, who plays Maliva. We get her. We get Bela Lugosi on the cart. And it's just the 2 gypsies. Now, as we'll learn, it's like a whole clan of gypsies. But for now, we just get these 2. So this is when Larry decides he and Gwen will go get their fortunes told.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It was great to see Bella come down the street.
I don't recognize him as Bella from that shot. It's sort of a long shot, and he's wearing a mustache and a hat, and I don't really recognize it as Bela Lugosi. I love that he's sort of disguised here.
I love how the fortune tellers too are just rolling into town it's oh, it's just that time again. Here they come. It's just part of the culture of the country and the landscape. It's just we don't run them out of town like every other movie. That's what it seems to me, right? Every other movie treats gypsies as unseemly or whatever, but apparently, or allegedly I should say, in some of my family history going back on the Norwegian side, a few of them date back to gypsies, and I always thought they were very interesting, fascinating in films, and I just like to see them here treated like everybody else, I guess.
I feel like if we were on mainland Europe, they might be treated a little bit differently. It seems here in the English countryside, or the Welsh countryside rather, that they would be seen almost as a novelty. Oh, we have gypsies visiting. That means there's going to be a carnival, there's going to be fortune telling, and then they're going to move.
The circus came to town.
Yes, this representation of this group of people seems much more in line with that than as opposed to the more xenophobic arguments. I don't want to get into that. But here they very much seem to be sort of looking forward to this carnival, the fortune telling, all that from a sort of novelty perspective. So, whatever the case may be, I am glad that it does take a positive approach to these people being in town and not a negative one, because we see that so often. So now we cut to a scene with Larry and his dad, and they're talking more werewolves.
Just talking werewolves. He sees the cane, right? He's like, ah, interesting. The pentagram and the wolf's head and all that and everything.
Yes, and so we get Claude Rains reciting the poem, and this is like, I think, within 2 minutes of the last time. Larry is like real excited. He just met this woman, Gwen, at the antique shop. Of course, Sir John knows him, so now it's an opportunity to learn a little bit more about her.
Yeah, it was interesting how Sir John was kind of like, he knew what Larry meant when he's like, I ran into this woman, and he's like, oh, of course I know that person, but was just like, I know everybody in town. Like, you're going to have to know everybody in town. And then Larry just kind of goes from like, I met a girl to like, oh no, the responsibility and the pressures are starting to kind of like maybe sink in a minute.
And so Larry immediately heads out for his date with Gwen. The fog has already started. The set is, it's dark. It's nighttime. The antique shop is closed. Larry creeps up on her. I mean, that's the only real way to put it. I mean, he's trying to be funny about it, but he creeps up on her and is still planning to go on a date with her. But what he doesn't account for is that she has a friend who is also accompanying her that evening.
Oh, I loved that. That was such a great bit where she's like, okay, I'll go with you, but my friend Jenny's coming. She heard we were going to get our fortune told and wants it told as well. And he just gets like, I don't know if the modern term is appropriate, but cock-blocked here by Jenny. And he's just like, oh, man. But okay, whatever. I think he kind of turns it into like a more the merrier situation. I don't know if the modern term menage a trois was circulating around back then either, but perhaps that was on Larry's mind at one point.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see his face turn, like he's a little bit disappointed, but he's definitely making lemonade from lemons here because he decides, okay, the three of us are going to go have our fortunes told. And we get the third recitation of the poem. Jenny gives it to him as they are strolling through this foggy forest, and she actually picks some wolfbane, which will come into play in just a few minutes.
It's amazing how they all know this like a nursery rhyme they were taught in kindergarten, like it's so amazing how they just go around reciting it. Like Jenny's like, oh, have you heard this one yet? And it's like, oh, you would have thought he'd heard it 5 times by now. He's been home for 2 hours. Like, of course he's heard it.
As somebody who grew up in South Jersey with the legend of the Jersey Devil kind of being recited frequently, it very much gave me that sort of a feeling. I don't know how many people can relate to that, but I'm fortunate that I'm from part of the United States where we have something like that. But yeah, as kids, we would tell stories about the Jersey Devil. Like there's multiple origin stories depending on who's telling it.
I wrote half a screenplay in school about the Jersey Devil, so
that's right.
I did some thorough researching.
It doesn't strike me as completely unusual because I grew up around something similar. But the fact that there is a consistent mythology around it, that's new for me. But I love that, everyone knows this poem. And so we get it for the third time in, I think it might even be 4 minutes. And so our trio approach the gypsy camp. At this point, it's not really a full carnival yet. It is just sort of the wagon and the horse. Bela Lugosi looking incredible with the hair, the mustache, the big puffy sleeves. Like he just looks so comfortable in this costume, this outfit.
Yeah, he's almost looking like half a wolfman already.
Yes.
Right. But, the crazy thing is, like, it feels like the twist still kind of works. Like, it still feels like a twist when the reveal comes that it was him. It's so great, man, that he's the first wolf. I love that like Bella gets to be a werewolf.
Yeah, I think in my notes I wrote that this is the second time that we have seen Bella able to turn into a wolf. Because if you remember in Dracula, he had the ability to transform into a... Now, we don't see that transformation. They imply the bat transformation, but there's that moment where John Harker is looking across the fields, like outside the window, off the balcony, and he sees a wolf running across the lawn. And it's Dracula. So Bela Lugosi has become a wolf twice now, which is awesome.
I love it.
It's almost like a passing of the torch, right?
Yeah, it does kind of have that feel to it.
Lon Chaney will play Dracula later, but here I like that Bella is the wolf that will transform Lon into the Wolfman. So Jenny is getting her fortune told, and as that is going on, Larry and Gwen decide they're going to go for a walk and get to know each other a little bit better so as not to spy or intrude on Jenny's fortune. And this is where Larry completely gives himself away, like he admits to the telescope and him spying on her through her window.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a very bold strategy. I don't know that this would ever work for anybody, but for some reason that defies logic, she doesn't slap him in the face and run screaming.
I mean, the only thing that I could kind of gather from this is that Larry has virtue, right?
He's honest.
Yeah, that deep down he wasn't trying to be a creep. We might be looking at this through, modern glasses or a modern spyglass.
Right.
But yeah, I think ultimately it's to sort of clarify his intention.
Yeah.
That he means no harm, that he's not trying to be a menace, and that he probably knows what he did. Or, I mean, it's what he's even saying, right? He's like confessing, which I kind of give him credit for, but I am surprised that Gwen sticks around considering she's engaged.
Yeah. And despite all of it, I've said it a couple times, their chemistry works. She does seem to genuinely like him. And so I can buy it for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, we're over that hump, I think, for good now.
Yes. Now, we cut back to Jenny, who is having her fortune told. Bella is having a little bit of personal distress. He even has that great moment where he has his hand to his forehead and he sort of reveals the pentagram right above his right eye. And then as he takes her hand to read her palm, we see the pentagram appear on her palm.
And that's when I was like, oh, right, he's a wolf too. I forgot. I actually forgot from the last time I watched this movie. Because I've watched so many movies between the last time I seen this movie. And I was like, oh, that's so awesome. Like, Bella gets to be the first wolf. He's going to kill her. It is inevitable. Is that a good cover to be a fortune teller if you're a werewolf?
From a logic point of view, it does seem a little bit irresponsible for Bella to be open for business knowing that he is a werewolf.
I was also like, you can't tell her fortune either. Like, you can't tell her she's going to die in 20 minutes, I mean, you could. You know it's going to happen. But, again, you don't have to take an oath or anything, but...
How long has he been a werewolf? And if he's been a werewolf for a long time, he should know, maybe don't give fortunes when you might turn into a werewolf.
Two things, you don't know when you're going to transform, right? It's usually when you're in an aggressive or agitated state, because it's not about the moon.
Not yet, yeah.
Yeah, it's not about any of that yet. So he might not know. He may not have transformed for months, right? Or years even. And also, how long has he been a werewolf? And is that why he turned into a full wolf? Because he is an older werewolf.
Right.
And that the wolfman is a young pup, and so he only knows how to walk on 2 feet. It's sort of he hasn't gotten down to the ground yet, but...
There's so many great questions that are not going to be answered in an hour and 10 minutes. Yeah, it is fun to think about. The fact that the moon has not been introduced as a factor does change this a little bit for me, but at the same time, he's a werewolf. He knows he's a werewolf, but also he's a gypsy, so maybe he's just trying to make as much money as he can when he can. Doesn't always have control. There's a lot to consider here.
So, I was thinking sort of the traveling thing, being on the road the whole time is actually a good cover.
That's a smart move, yeah.
And then it's well, what profession does that? He's either gonna be a fortune teller or a dentist, right? That's the only guy I know that was kind of going town to town, kind of pulling teeth, maybe. I don't know.
We get a look at the wolfbane that has fallen to the floor and it's, of course, bloomed. The horse starts going, and of course, all these signs tell us he's about to transform. We hear the wolf howl. Jenny begins running through the foggy woods this first sequence. Oh, man, it's so gorgeous. And now all of these characters are going to collide in the same moment. As Jenny is being attacked by the wolf, Larry approaches with his silver cane. Oh, man, the shot of the wolf tearing Jenny apart is way more graphic than I had remembered. It's not close up with blood splurting out or anything like that, but it does have a kind of grisly nature to it, and I think it is because they used a wolf for this sequence.
This whole sequence is pretty well staged. It's really great. I think the wolf howl is awesome. Her scream is blood curdling. That's so terrific. And it's kind of all mostly played out in sound effect, that's
Mm-hmm.
really grisly. Like you said, you hear a lot of growling and tearing of the dress and stuff. And when Larry gets there, she's kind of gone already, right? The wolf seems like he's just picking at her or tugging at her. The implied violence is very dramatic, way more than I was expecting. I think at one point, maybe later on in the movie, I actually was whoa, and put my arms up going that was way more of a shock than I was expecting.
I loved the decision to stage the action behind trees and other things that could obfuscate your view, which allows them to cheat a lot of that action a little more, sort of hide the crimes, so to speak. And so with the editing, it feels a lot more fast-paced and violent, and it's almost like with Psycho in the shower scene, you think you see more than you see because of the quick editing.
And they convey a lot. Like, a lot happens in a very short period of time. Larry shows up, he jumps on the wolf and, like, starts beating it. It bites him, he kills it. It's a lot in a very short period of time. It's like these bursts of action.
Now, fun fact about the wolf that they used for this sequence was actually a retired police dog named Moose. Lon Chaney actually ended up adopting Moose after the filming was over.
Oh, awesome.
So I love the idea that Lon Chaney would go on to adopt the dog that changed him into a werewolf.
Very cool.
So now we've got Larry injured. He has bludgeoned the wolf to death with his cane. Jenny is unfortunately dead, and Maliva shows up with her carriage and transports him back to his home. Now, of course, Maliva knows what's up. As soon as Gwen mentions that he's been bitten, you can see it in her face. She knows what's up, and we're going to get that interaction between Larry and Maliva later. But I love that she's the all-knowing character here, right? Maliva transports Larry back to Talbot Castle. Okay, so the one scene that's not here that I wish was here is Gwen realizing who Larry is, right? He kind of hides the whole fact that he's a Talbot, even in that scene earlier on, either the first time they meet in the antique shop, although no, I think it's when he goes to meet up for their date and Jenny's there. He just like, I'm just Larry, like he doesn't offer his last name. So we don't get that moment where Gwen learns that he is a Talbot, because I feel like that would be an important thing for her to learn.
Yeah, because it's interesting that I didn't pick up on it was missing. I assume it's just, for time and stuff, but that does come up later with her fiance when Frank is like, oh, of course she'd want to marry you. You're a Talbot. And,
Right.
You have all the money and all that kind of stuff. So interesting. Yeah.
When we finally do get to Talbot Castle, Paul is there, Larry's childhood friend Paul. He's just hanging out with Sir John, and they're kind of discussing Larry's future as head of Talbot Castle when Larry comes stumbling through the door with Gwen. Maliva kind of disappears immediately, and this is where we get to meet Twiddle as well.
Paul has that line where he's like, murder, gypsies, werewolves, what now? Like,
yes, so Twiddle comes in. I'm not entirely sure what Twiddle's relationship is to the Talbots, but he comes in and says, Jenny has been murdered. She's been found, like her body all torn up. And yeah, Paul's like, what? Murder? Gypsies? What's going on? Paul immediately heads out to investigate.
I want to know more about what Paul and Larry's dad are talking about, because we come in on them a couple times throughout the movie as if they've been hanging out, conspiring, but it doesn't seem like anything bad. It's just nerve-wracking. The movie just kind of from this point on just keeps building and building for me, and I just get more and more tense.
Paul is the sort of head of police in the town, and John Talbot is in charge of the whole town. So it makes sense to me that they would have a somewhat casual relationship, because so much of what they do day to day can be intertwined. You know what I mean? They have a working relationship, so they get together for drinks once in a while. So now the whole crew heads out to inspect Jenny's body, and Twiddle's there to take the notes. Dr. Lloyd is there also. Dr. Lloyd is, I guess, the Talbot family doctor.
Oh yeah, Dr. Lloyd.
So while they're investigating the scene, they notice Bella's body there also. And they notice that Bella has no shoes on. He's completely barefoot. And it's Frank Andrews, who I don't think we know who Frank Andrews is quite yet, but he discovers Larry's cane at the scene of the crime. Twiddle is taking copious notes and trying not to pass out the entire time.
This is actually a pretty cool mystery that it's going to set up, It's because it's they know Larry was there. Larry is not going to make any qualms about being there. He doesn't have, his marks have disappeared conveniently, but he swears he has the scars to prove it. He claims it was a wolf. They claim it was a man, and they know there was a wolf involved, and they come up with this sort of conclusion that Larry must have come along and the wolf killed Bella, and it's just this convoluted, weird little mystery that's about to happen.
Yeah, I think the understanding, as far as they can tell, is that the wolf killed Jenny, and the suspicion is that Larry killed Bella, but they don't know why. I think that's as much as they figure happened. And so they pay a visit. We get Paul and Dr. Lloyd. They both show up the following day to question Larry. he tells the story exactly as it happened. As far as he's concerned, he was out with Gwen and Jenny. Jenny was attacked by a wolf. He killed the wolf with his cane. Like, he doesn't, when they say, hey, is this your cane? He doesn't pretend to hide it. He's like, no, that's my cane. Of course it is. And it's then when he finds out that Bella the gypsy was killed and that his cane was found at the site of the murder. And now things are starting to get strange.
Yeah, and they leave the murder weapon with Larry. They leave the cane behind. But this is very kind of interesting scenes. It's going to start the beginning of Larry's, like, what's going on kind of thing. They start throwing around stuff like, is he thinking straight? Maybe he's mentally ill, this kind of, that kind of, like, things are starting to open up about the possibilities of what is actually going on. And he is actually going to turn into a wolf, but there's going to be a lot of talk of, is he going to actually turn into a wolf? Or is it just that side of him?
Yeah. This is where we have Paul and Dr. Lloyd a little bit at odds. Paul is trying to get to the bottom of this murder, and Dr. Lloyd is trying to protect Larry and say, let's give it some time before we start assaulting him with questions.
But Dr. Lloyd has got a point. It's like his brother just died. Like, he hasn't been around for almost 20 years. Like, he's having it could be a shock of all this, like, coming back. Maybe he doesn't know what he saw exactly. It was dark. Let's not rush to judgment here.
There's not enough evidence to really say for sure it was Larry who was guilty, but I do think it's odd, now that you mention it, that they leave the murder weapon with the Talbots. Then we get the back and forth between Sir John, Paul, and Dr. Lloyd, kind of trying to figure out how this could have happened, how Larry could be telling the truth or lying. Like, they kind of talk through this situation. Some insist that Larry imagined it. I think one of the things that I like about Claude Rains' performance here, or his character at least, is that even though they are estranged, he's been estranged from his son, he still is a good dad. He's not immediately jumping to the conclusion that his son committed murder. Obviously, he's confused. Maybe there's something going on in his head. So I do like that he is there for his son when he needs to be.
Yeah, it's kind of refreshing that the father-son dynamic isn't the neurosis of the character for once.
Right. This scene cuts to not Bella's funeral, but his body has been placed in a coffin and is being transported to the cemetery. And we get a great scene where, this is almost out of Frankenstein.
Oh, it's gorgeous, yeah.
We're in this crypt, and these guys bring the coffin in. Larry sneaks in, a lot of heavy shadows, candles and torches lighting the room. I love the aesthetic here. And before Larry can really have a chance to see Bella, Maliva comes in and gives that speech about the way you walked was thorny through no fault of your own, like that, which we'll hear a few more times. As she leaves, that's when Larry finally gets a chance to view Bella. But the scene cuts. We don't really get a chance. We don't get too much time with them, unfortunately.
Yeah, the scene's more about how Maliva's like, he's not going to be buried here. Like, we're taking the body and we're going to have like our own celebration. He's my Bella.
Right. It also establishes for Larry that she has information.
She recited the Wolfman poem, or one of them.
So it establishes that for, like, they're going to set up him seeking her out for more information. And so now we cut back to the antique shop. It's like a back room, like the parlor of the antique shop, where we're with Gwen and her father, Charles Conliffe. And her dad is totally cool. She's all flustered, and she was with a man, not her fiance, the night before, but he's like, trusts her completely. I found his character to be so refreshing, because so many movie dads at this time were overly protective of their daughters, and I love that she has his total trust, and that if she was with another man, there was nothing else going on.
I'm telling you, it's just not a theme in this movie. It's just dads are great.
Right, and he keeps that up. Like, that's sort of what's going on in this scene, because a bunch of townswomen like come in and they're like, we want to know what happened. So we realize that it's Jenny's mother and a bunch of her friends who come in, and she is irate because she wants to get to the bottom of who killed her daughter. And of course, she knows Jenny was with Gwen. She knows Jenny was with Larry Talbot. There must be something suspicious going on if Gwen's hanging around with this other man. And so as Charles Conliffe is defending his daughter, as if on cue, Larry shows up and is basically like, yeah, I was there. What do you want to know? I love this scene.
Yeah, this scene is crazy. How Jenny's mom bursts in and is like, she walked with another man and my daughter's dead and that guy's a murderer. And then Larry comes in and Larry has like a lot of nerve because he kind of maybe might be a murderer. You know, he didn't murder Jenny. That's not what I'm saying. But like his hands, they're not entirely clean of the whole situation. Like he is mixed up in this kind of, you know, so it's kind of weird that he's like running around town during the scandal. Like, well, what are you going to do about it? What if it did happen?
At this point, he's totally convinced that he killed a wolf, not a man, but he knows that he was there. And he doesn't have an airtight alibi either. So yeah, he's a little bit on the defensive, but I love that moment when Jenny's mother and her friends are leaving. And he gives like the coldest stare I think I've ever seen Lon Chaney give anyone, at least as Larry Talbot. So I love that just that subtle detail from him.
And then, of course, Gwen overheard everything from the other room. Kind of hard to console, but, you know, nevertheless, Larry tries his best.
Yes, he is trying his best. And this is also when Frank Andrews shows up. And this is kind of like the beginning of that awkward love triangle, right?
Yeah, and Frank hates this guy. Well, he works for him too, right? He's like the gamekeeper at the Talbot mansion. He's not very fond of Larry.
Yeah, but I think that he is kinder to Larry than he should be. I think, like I was referring to before about that earlier script when Larry wasn't a Talbot, he was an American visiting. It makes more sense to me that he would be much more aggressive with someone from outside his social circles. But I feel like he knows the Talbots at least. And so to meet Larry Talbot, I don't think would be all that upsetting to him, but at the same time he is also meeting a man who was spending the previous evening with his fiance.
Yeah, is this the part with the dog too, where the dog growls at Larry? It's all just, the scene is like, starts out with him defending Gwen and then collapses in on him, where it's like, here comes her fiance, you're getting growled at by this cute little dog now. It's just reminders that like, it's not all good.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is the beginning of sad boy Larry Talbot, who almost from this point on, I think his entire desire is to die.
I mean, not that he should go that far, but like, it's crazy how all of this could be read kind of like in his head, right? Like that he doesn't actually turn into a wolf, you know? Like you could do this story that way, like maybe not beat for beat or anything, but like a guy with all these mounting pressures. Like I'm interested, like I would even go back and watch that Jack Nicholson movie Wolf, because it almost feels like that's what that movie is closer to, about this guy under like all of this stress from work and he's in the corporate world and it's just collapsing in on him and like his wolf comes out or whatever. Like I remember maybe around that time there were a lot of businessmen going on retreats to find their spirit animals and shit like that too. So who knows? But it's interesting how they're packing that on, and I like that. It's giving him a lot to deal with.
Yeah. Now we have Jenny and Frank, and they've gone to the carnival, right? These gypsies have set up their full-fledged carnival. There's a lot of people hanging out there. There's a shooting gallery, and that's where the three characters come back together. And I think in an effort to sort of smooth over the awkwardness from the previous scene, Frank suggests they have a go at the shooting gallery. And I love this sequence. You know, Larry is very competent with a rifle, manages to hit all of his targets until the target that pops up is the wolf. And we get that stinger. Did you catch that? I love that noise.
So the scene is so great. I almost felt like he was going to start crying. Does he start crying like almost when he sees that wolf? It's so funny how off screen, well, they cut to his dad, right? Claude Rains. And he's like, yes, he's a remarkable shot. And like all this stuff, he's like, I've got all this. It's like, I can't wait to watch my son like be a sharpshooter and like all this stuff, like so proud. And then he misses the one and he's like, huh. Okay. Right, something's up.
Larry doesn't cry, but he does seem on the verge of tears. Like, just because he's just so confused. The whole wolf thing is really eating at him.
I gotta say, like, if it was this or the bear scene, I'm glad they went with this and not him fighting a bear.
Yeah, this scene seems so much more natural.
Oh, wait, I didn't even think about it. Even though we don't get him shot with a silver bullet, I wonder if that was foreshadowing in the original script, where it was like he was gonna shoot the wolf and at the end he gets shot. Like, that could have been something.
It could have been, for sure. Yeah, I could see that. But unfortunately, here, it's really just coincidence, right? He doesn't die by bullet. But that would have been a great little bit of foreshadowing. Honestly, depending on how they wanted to end the movie, whether by silver bullet or by the cane, I think if they had played this scene up a little more, the bullet could have had the same effect as the cane, just visually speaking. But at the end of the day, I totally just like this scene the way it is, and I'm glad they stuck with the cane. But yeah, I could definitely see a script where that's the case. So we have Larry finally meeting up with Maliva. She gives him the straight truth.
The talk.
Yeah, he insists he killed a wolf, not a man, and she tells him straight up that it was Bella who had become a wolf, and that was the wolf that Larry killed.
She tells him his fortune. That's what I took it as, right? She's like, here's what your life's like now. Like, you are the wolf. She gives him the charm, though, so that's very nice of her. I wonder why Bella wasn't wearing that.
Yeah, so that's one thing that didn't really stick for werewolf mythology, right? Like that necklace, we don't know that it would have prevented him from changing. Maybe it would have slowed down the effects.
Could have been like a placebo effect kind of thing, too.
Maybe, we don't know. We don't ever see it work.
Yeah, he gives it away.
There is magic at play here that doesn't make it through to future werewolf movies. We'll get to it. But we never do see this charm do anything. So we have no way to know if it would have prevented Larry from becoming a werewolf or not. But I do love that moment. We also get that moment where Maliva explains to him that a werewolf can be killed with a silver bullet, a silver knife, or a stick with a silver handle.
Yeah, I love this whole thing, man. I think it's played like so perfectly. Just the two of them, like all of the lore coming out like at the perfect time, everything kind of building right to this moment, and it just executed so well.
I love how sort of casual she is about the whole thing.
She's almost got an air to her of where it's like, well, it's your problem now. Not in like a mean way, really, but kind of like, I know what I'm talking about because I was with Bella and all this stuff, and like I had to do things to keep him from biting me, I guess. And I pass on what I know to you.
Oh, and she also establishes that whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives will become a werewolf. There's a couple of these scenes in here that are really just like information dumps, right? And in hindsight, it's like, okay, here are all the werewolf rules. But I have to wonder how this played back then, you know, because they didn't know that this was going to be how werewolves were handled for the rest of time.
I feel like the information in this movie is doled out exceedingly well because there's so many little bits and pieces of information along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like certain characters are adding stuff as we go, you know, it's like, oh, one guy's like, yeah, a pentagram will appear in your hand. The other one's like, oh yeah, silver's gonna do the job. And like, we get to this scene and she pulls it all together. You know,
yeah.
She like lays it all down on the line, and so like, oh, okay, I'm with it now. Everything's lining up.
Once Larry leaves her tent and goes off into the night with his charm, the entire group of gypsies just sort of fuck off, right?
They are out of there.
They're like, there's a werewolf in camp. We have to get out of here. They immediately been breaking down everything.
They are ghosts.
It makes me wonder how they handled being among Bella's company before this, you know, because he was traveling with that group. There was a werewolf among them then. Why are they freaking out? Maybe it's because Larry is a brand new werewolf and hasn't learned how to sort of control his impulses or his transformation.
Possibly. It could be they didn't know about that Bella was a wolf either, that they tried to keep it a secret or something.
Also possible. And so now, as Larry is making his way through the camp, he runs into Gwen and he gives her that charm to keep her safe.
Yeah, her and Frank had like a little tiff.
Yes. Which we don't see.
Well, I feel like we see the beginning of it when Larry walks away from the shooting gallery and he makes some kind of comment and she doesn't appreciate it. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that, like, you would care. Like, he kind of had that, I didn't think you'd care if I made a joke about him. Why do you care about Larry so much? Kind of. That's how it felt to me.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But yeah, now Larry is now starting to buy into this idea that there's something wrong with him. And so he gives her the charm to keep her safe.
He tells her, I'm a werewolf. He says it like straight out. And she's like, oh, thanks for the lucky charm. Here's a penny.
Right? Yeah, because
like,
she can't accept a present without giving something in return.
He should have taken that lucky penny.
He probably should have. And then he leans in for the kiss, which gets interrupted by the leaving gypsies.
Yeah, that was some nice timing there.
I love that moment between the two of them. I think that the acting there is so palpable.
They're so great together. I wonder if it's fueled by the backstage problems or whatever, but they've got such a great spark on screen there.
The next thing is that John Fulton nightmare sequence with all of the different dissolves, and there's so many different effects happening here all at once. And it's just like every important visual we've seen up to this point. There's even that sort of kaleidoscope effect on the cane.
Yeah.
I love that sequence there. Larry immediately rushes home and begins
freaking out, I would say.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like, I don't think he knows he's going to transform yet, but he's like freaked out by the whole situation. He takes his jacket off, takes his shirt off, tie, all that.
It seems like he feels like something's about to happen, right?
Yes, but he's not entirely sure what. Then we get our first transformation sequence. Now this, I said before, I remembered there being a transformation of the face, of Lon's face, but it's not here. He sits in that chair and we see his feet change.
Legs only.
He pulls up the leg of his pants and he's got a lot more leg hair than he is used to having. He knows this is going down now, and the legs dissolve and dissolve and dissolve into the various shots of the fur, so he's got full werewolf feet, and that's all we see leave the room. Apparently the boots that he had to wear were sort of designed like a high heel shoe, but they were so stiff he couldn't rest on his heels if he wanted to. So like that sole was permanently arched like that.
So he's up on his tippy toes, walking around on those fur feet.
Right? The Wolfman sort of look wasn't just Jack Pierce. I mean, Jack Pierce was in charge of his face, but then you had the gloves and the boots that he would put on, and that was sort of a collaboration between maybe the makeup department, the costume department. You had a bunch of people here all trying to make this Wolfman come to life, which I think is really cool.
And I gotta admit too, Dan, I also thought that there was gonna be a headshot transformation the first time, and I was sitting here going like, wait a minute, there's no way we're just gonna see the legs. There's no way we're just gonna see the legs. Oh, we're only gonna see the legs. I can't believe it. So like sitting there, I was kind of bummed, but like in retrospect, clever move, because when we see the reveal, it's such a dramatic tracking shot through those trees and through the woods that when he comes upon the camera, it's like, oh my God, whoa.
Yes. I was just about to say that in retrospect, I'm happy we don't see it, because when he like leers around the tree and the light shines on his face there, like that is such a better reveal.
Yeah, it's so weird to say that it's a better reveal than seeing a transformation, but it just is. There's just something more shocking. It's almost like when Frankenstein walked through that door, right, and turned around and they did like that triple cut.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
This is sort of similar, but it's in like this very sort of long swooping tracking shot where he's like masked behind some trees, and it's, you see his feet and his body, and then he comes around and it's his full face and you're like, whoa.
Yep. And we got those beautiful glossy trees. Love it. And oddly enough, he has a shirt on again.
I didn't even think of that, Dan. That's insane. I didn't even think. I was like, why don't I see tank top Wolfman?
Yeah, no, he's got a brand new shirt on. And so in this sequence, he attacks like a gravedigger. From what I read, it's implied that it is the man digging Jenny's grave. He's burying her in that spot. Again, it's not explicitly said in the movie, so for all intents and purposes, it's just a guy out in the cemetery digging a grave. We get a very violent attack. It gets worse later when Larry attacks Gwen, but I think that Lon's performance here, like his physical performance, is so good. He's so menacing with his body language as the Wolfman. I don't know. I feel like these attacks are worse than they actually are on screen.
Yeah, he's got a great physicality to him when he becomes Wolfman. He's way different than when he's Larry.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like, I don't know how else to describe it, except there's just such this benevolence to Larry and the way he carries himself that, like, he wouldn't hurt a fly, right?
Yep.
Like, that kind of is the vibe I'm getting from him. And then when Wolfman, he's, like, jolty and rigid and, like, spazzing and, like, all this, like, weird movement. It's, like, very inhuman kind of stuff. I'm like, who is his movement coach? Like, is there anything on that, or is this just all from him, because it's like such a stark difference in his body language. And he's a very imposing dude. And so when he's just standing next to a guy normally, he kind of towers over you. But when he's like attacking this gravedigger or whatever, like he's got no chance. He's a huge Wolfman.
Oh, for sure. The townspeople hear the howling, and some people go out to investigate what is going on out in the woods. And of course, we've got Dr. Lloyd, we've got Trusty Paul, our top cop, we've got Mr. Twiddle, and it appears that the man in the grave had had his jugular severed, same way Jenny had earlier in the film. So as far as they're concerned, it is the same culprit who killed Jenny and this gravedigger. Now, they do notice the wolf tracks leading away, so I think they're safely assuming that the same wolf killed both of these characters. And so the wolf tracks lead all the way back up to Talbot Castle. And we get that great shot of the muddy wolf tracks coming in through the windowsill, across the floor.
And if I'm not mistaken, they go from wolf tracks to people feet. Is that the implication that we're supposed to be tracking like the transformation back into a human?
It's not quite that sophisticated.
Okay, I was hoping it was, but I couldn't quite tell.
Yeah, it's pretty much wolf tracks up into the bed, and then you see Larry's bare feet hanging over the edges.
I'll take it. I love the concept. I love it. I mean, the only other thing they could have done in the woods has been like, oh, look, the wolf tracks, and then the last two are like a pair of human feet in the mud or something. I just like that whole idea.
And so Larry wakes up, and it's almost as if he's been on this like bender the night before, right? He's all disheveled, his hair is a mess. He notices a pentagram scar where his bite wound was. And he notices all of the wolf tracks, the muddy wolf tracks all over the room. So he immediately clears up all that evidence.
You know, it's funny I didn't even consider this until you just referred to his night out as a bender, but I wonder if Lon Chaney kind of associated any of this role with his heavy drinking, being an alcoholic, like waking up the next day with like hangovers and not quite remembering like what you might have done. And, you know, I think the Wolfman can be kind of read in that direction if you want to as well. I think Jekyll and Hyde was very much sort of like that, you know, when men become, or when people in general like just get over intoxicated and lose control or whatever.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I don't know that he necessarily understood that he had a problem with alcohol at this time in his career. He certainly did by the time he died, but at this stage, it's possible he didn't and may not have made that correlation. But either way, I do think that it's a great metaphor for the actual demons that were haunting him in real life. Yeah, that's definitely spot on. And so Larry, in a discussion with his dad, learns the gravedigger was killed by a wolf and that there were wolf tracks leading up to the house. And that's kind of all anybody knows. But now Larry is convinced that he's a werewolf, so now he is really kind of curious to know more about this whole legend of lycanthropy. He begins asking his dad more about this stuff, right?
Yeah, I love this kind of stuff, and I wish we had more time for it in the movie, because I feel like this is where we're starting to sort of dive into like man of science versus man of faith kind of discussions, and like, you know, I don't know, horror in science or whatever. I mean, it reminded me a little of the movie Contact. It's reminding me of the show Midnight Mass, which I know we're both watching right now, but it very much sort of dives into those metaphors and those themes. And
yes, I mean, this scene in particular gets really into the duality of man, the good and evil side of all of us. Theme-wise, this is the scene, right? If you want to dissect the themes of the Wolfman, this is it. We don't have a ton of time to talk about it, but
it's just nice that they even mention sort of like modern science stuff or modern like they talk about possible schizophrenia and things like that. Things more on the modern mind, you know, at the time, and like with mental illness.
I do think it's interesting. So much of this movie puts subtext right in the text. Most movies don't say, here's the theme of this film in the dialogue, but like, this is it right here. So I love that. I love that, like, it's almost beating you over the head that this is what this movie's about. This is about the animal side of all of us.
Yeah, some movies just can get away with it. Like, this movie has a certain grace, and especially when you have someone like Claude Rains in this role, especially like at this point in the movie where so much has been revealed, we almost just need clarity on things. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've been thrown a bunch of stuff, and we're just like, from time to time, it'll just sort of get like ironed out properly for the audience. And I think these are one of those great moments.
Yeah. The next scene here, we're at the church, and this is sort of like everybody heading to church, I guess, on a Sunday morning. The murder of the gravedigger is the talk of the town. It's all anybody can talk about right now. And so Larry and Sir John go to church. Now, this is the cathedral from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. They shoot this super tight. In some of the wider shots, you might be able to recognize it, but for the most part, they really do their best to not give it away. And now Larry, as he is entering church, like, finds himself really unable to stay. You know, I think he's feeling very uneasy to hang out in this holy place.
That is, again, maybe one of the greatest shots of the film is when he's standing at the back of the church and the camera is just tracking down everybody down and looking, and they all turn around to look at Larry one after the other. It's so strong, so powerful. You know, you had like right before that there was a bit of comedy with like Jenny's mom spreading rumors about Larry, and someone said like, oh, the grave digger's having a grave dug for him now, and like everyone kind of had a laugh. But now we get this shot and it's just like, oh my gosh, all the air has just been drained from the room.
And you got to figure that realistically, they're probably all turning because Larry has been absent for almost 20 years. And like, this is the new Talbot who will be in charge of everything. But for him, all he can think about is the guilt he feels for what he may have done to this poor gravedigger. To him, all those people suspect that it's him. Right?
Yeah, that's what I love so much. There's almost like this double meaning to the shot, like depending on who you're looking through, like what lens you're looking through, Larry or the townsfolk. Yeah.
Yeah, so I love that moment. It's such a great tracking shot from pew to pew. So they're analyzing this wolf print, and what they have sort of figured out is that this print is unlike any wolf they have ever seen. They can't really identify it. And of course, Larry comes in and says, yeah, it's a werewolf. And they're all like, what, a werewolf?
Frank's like, it's not a werewolf, definitely. And Paul's kind of like, well, it's not definitely not a werewolf. Like, I get the sense that Paul's sort of more, everything's on the table for him. Whereas Frank is just like, there's no way. And the doctor's like, well, let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's interesting how they are not all immediately saying that it's nonsense, right? Like, I feel like these legends, like on some level, I think they believe there's something to them, right? Maybe not Dr. Lloyd. I mean, they're all playing their own roles here, but like the fact that they're not all in agreement against Larry that he's speaking nonsense is interesting to me. I think Paul's initial thing is like, we got to put Larry away, right? We got to get him into an institution. He's talking nonsense. Sir John is insistent that he stay in his own home, which I think is interesting. This is another example of him being a really good dad, or a supportive dad, at least.
I was surprised that Dr. Lloyd would suggest shock therapy.
Their shock therapy, yeah.
I don't know if that was cutting edge stuff at the time or anything like that. Like, I don't know about that kind of treatment or really, but it just seemed like, wow, I'm surprised they mentioned that in this movie. But again, some of the themes of the movie is like based in mental health and all that kind of stuff. So I guess at the end of the day, I'm not that shocked that that term was thrown around.
Yeah. There's a scene in the 2010 Wolfman where it's like a whole sanatorium sort of sequence, and I know Larry goes through this therapy where he is like strapped to a chair and submerged in ice water, which might be early shock therapy to shock the system. They're not actual electricity, right? So like I think about that, and it's almost a shame that we don't get that here. We don't get to see Larry go through that sort of antiquated medical process, but it's because Sir John is insistent that he not be institutionalized. And there's that great moment where Dr. Lloyd asks Sir John, you know, like, are you more concerned about your family name? And I love that for John Talbot, it's more about protecting his son, not putting his son through something that he thinks is nonsensical. His motivation is good, but it turns out that like he's still wrong about his son. His son is a werewolf. But I do love those good parental instincts. So now Paul and Frank and the rest of this crew of like werewolf hunters, they head out into the forest during the daytime and they set a bear trap to catch this wolf. Larry has transformed into a werewolf for what appears to be the second consecutive night, is stalking through the forest and gets caught in the bear trap.
I can't believe that worked.
Yeah, it feels like it was too simple. But Mariva appears again in her cart, notices him in werewolf form, trapped in the bear trap. And like, dude, I love how casual she is approaching a werewolf.
And he's in agony. Like, he is selling it. I believe it. Like, they really clap a trap on that ankle of his or on that foot of his or something. But yeah, the werewolf is crazy in this scene.
And I think he kind of like passes out.
He does pass out. It seems that excruciating too. And the search party kind of like miss him. They walk right past him.
Yeah. Mariva recites, "The way you walked was thorny.
Through no fault of your own." Yep.
This is the thing that was interesting to me, is that she had this like sort of magical ability to transform him back into a man. And I don't know if it was a temporary fix or if it's something that she could do multiple times. Like, I don't know. This is something I have never seen before.
So this, for me here, like towards the end of the movie almost, brought a lot of stuff to the surface. Is like, oh, this is what she would say to Bella to turn him back whenever he would start changing. And like, that's how they sort of survived for so long. I don't know why she stuck around when the rest of the gypsies kind of split, right? They all took off, but like, she kind of hangs back for a while.
Yeah, it's almost as if she knew what was going to happen and sent them away for their own safety and then hung around because she knew.
I like that. Yeah. To kind of clear the playing field a little bit, like not as much for the Wolfman to eat. But yeah, and then I was just like, okay, so if you say this to the Wolfman, like he will turn back. I'm willing to buy that.
It's something I have never seen before, and I do like that it exists here. I would love to see that referenced again. I know Universal is currently in pre-production for a Wolfman movie starring Ryan Gosling. Yeah, I would love to see some more callbacks to this old original Wolfman.
I would just love to see this remade and sort of expanded upon for another, 30 minutes.
Oh, hell yeah. The magic works. Larry is transformed back into his human self, released from the bear trap, and then he's just sort of walking barefoot through the forest. And when he comes across a few members of this like hunting party, they're like, "Oh, hey, Mr. Larry, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "I'm doing the same thing you're doing. I'm looking for this wolf."
This is so funny to me because it's like one of the least necessary scenes that they decided to film, because it's just like, oh, that's weird. Larry's here too. Okay, I guess. It would have just been just as easy to cut to him wandering through town without that little altercation.
Well, I think that the reason they put that in there is that because the hunting party is made up of some pretty important characters in this story, right? I think it was important for them to see human Larry in that environment, if only to throw them off the trail, because they're looking for him, but they don't know they're looking for him. And to see him out there in human form, yeah, he's barefoot, which is strange, but they don't believe in werewolves. So for all they know, he is out there helping search for this werewolf. So I think that that's why they put that in there. Because if some no-name townsperson sees him, on his way home, it doesn't mean as much as if like Paul and Dr. Lloyd see him out there in that space.
Fair enough.
But now we have Larry stumbling through town in his bare feet. He is trying to reach Gwen. He does the old rocks on the window move.
Never fails.
This is kind of where I think Larry is trying to get himself away from her. Instead of just doing an Irish goodbye and taking off, he needs to say goodbye to her for real and let her know that he's never coming back. Which is the tragic mistake, right? He should have just headed off out into the wilderness.
Yeah, because, well, as he's saying goodbye, he sees the pentagram on Gwen's hand. So, if he had never stopped by to say anything, then maybe, he wouldn't have known he's going to have to kill her.
Exactly right. He sees the pentagram on her hand. He heads back home to say goodbye to his dad and admits the whole thing. Bella, the gypsy, was a werewolf. He killed Bella as a werewolf. He got bitten. He got turned into a werewolf. He's spouting all of this quote-unquote nonsense, and his dad's move is to help him face this fear that he believes he has and tie him to a chair. He straps him to a chair and sticks him right in the window, which I thought was strange because the full moon has not become a thing yet. But in any case, he thinks that by strapping Larry to the chair, Larry will not be able to move. They'll kill the wolf, and they'll show him, look, it was all in your imagination. You're not a werewolf. This is all silly.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of a wonderful dad protecting his son moment, in a way. And putting him in the window was partially maybe to keep an eye on him, but also so that he could see them.
Right, so he could see the hunting party, right? So he could see them kill the wolf.
It's just so funny how he's all tied up to that chair and everything.
Like, that, to me, would have been the perfect moment to do a full facial transformation.
Yeah.
If only the full moon had been introduced as a factor in the werewolf myth here. But it wasn't. So once Larry is strapped to that chair, Sir John goes out to join the rest of the party. They've got a little, platform set up there, a little watchtower. And as Sir John is going out, he decides at some point he wants to check on his son, right? He goes out there to check on the hunters. and then wants to go back to the house to check on his son, and runs into Maliva. Now, this is one of my favorite interactions in this whole movie. We have Maliva, who holds all of the knowledge, right? She is the smartest character in this movie. And then we have Sir John, who is so headstrong, and they come face to face. And I love seeing Maria Ospinskaya act with Claude Rains here. The contempt she has for him and his ignorance is just so great. I think this is the only time where she's kind of scary here.
Yeah.
In other scenes, she's kind of a comforting figure, but here she knows she's up against this guy who just doesn't believe a single thing she has to say. And so I feel like she's got to scare the shit out of him. And so she sort of turns it up to 11 here, and I just love this.
Yeah, I love the way this plays out too. And luckily, Larry gave him the cane, and she notices the cane too. And she's like, oh, it's a good thing you have the cane. And he's like, huh? What? They're just on two such different levels. She's like, your son hasn't told you who I am? And he's like, yeah, you're the gypsy that was like messing with his mind and everything. And it's like, oh no.
She's absolutely preying on his insecurity here, though, as well.
Well, I think she knows that he's going to have to kill his own son.
Well, yes, she knows that for sure, or at least she is sort of guiding him in that direction. But she knows that, like, he's scared and that he was, like, heading back home. I love the power she wields over him in this scene, because I don't think many people could claim to be superior to Claude Rains in most scenes. So yeah, she realizes what's transpiring. He's got the cane. There's no way that Larry's going to be held tight by whatever straps he has used to keep him restrained to that chair. So yeah, I think in a sort of subtle way, she's definitely leading him to kill his own son. And so a bunch of the hunters are sort of joking about werewolf legends. You know, it takes a silver bullet to kill a werewolf. They don't believe a single word of that nonsense. And Gwen also arrives. She runs into Maliva, and Maliva directs her also to where all the action's going to be. So now, this is the climax of the film here. We've got Larry as a werewolf, Sir John, and Gwen all converging on the same space. The hunting party is not too far behind. Gwen looks great. Gwen looks great running through this sort of foggy forest, and Lon in his werewolf makeup. This is the greatest scene in the whole movie, I think.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's just so dreamlike. The last few movies have really been missing this. It's lacking this kind of stuff. And here and not only do we get it back, but we get it back maybe better than before, right? Like new tricks are being pulled with new technologies and stuff, and it's just gorgeous. The way like the fog is, the motion of everything, it's all just very excellent.
This is really where Lon's physicality really is like full force.
Yeah, it's wild when he grabs her, you know? He grabs her and like poses with her.
I talked about like how violent he grabbed the gravedigger, right? I think this is worse than that. And we get close-ups of his face, of like the wild eyes and the gaping maw. This is where I feel like Lon's Wolfman is the most terrifying.
And I thought for sure that she was dead. Like, it just seems like he shook the life out of her or something like that.
He is very rough with her. I don't think she had a stunt double. So as far as I can tell, Lon really shook Evelyn Ankers around in this scene. I mean, it works. I hope she was okay, but it really works for this scene. And then that immediately transitions to Sir John attacking his son with the cane. This also is a very violent sequence, and also kind of reminiscent of Larry killing the wolf in that it's, cut up a bunch. It's not totally clear what's happening all the time. So I love that it's shot very similarly. Like there's a visual language as well. I love this scene.
Yeah, I picked up on that as well. Yeah, I love that. I love the way Larry and his father kind of bookend this movie in their actions. It's very brutal. Like, he just keeps going and going. And, like, granted, it's kind of between, like, shots of a tree and everything, but it almost doesn't matter. Like, I'm making it up in my mind worse than it actually is anyway. So
right.
I'm thinking, for one of the first times, I'm thinking about those sensors, And then I was like, oh, all they care about is if Larry and Gwen kissed because she was engaged to some dude. So as long as that didn't happen in the movie, I'm sure you could do whatever you want. And plus, they treat religion with respect for the most part in this film. They don't talk about the cross so much. It's all about the pentagram, so there's no real blaspheme when it comes down to like that kind of stuff. So yeah, I was like, they got away with a lot of brutality in this film.
I mean, let's be honest, sex has always been more offensive than violence.
Well, then, how do we explain the Invisible Woman? We didn't even talk about the censors on that episode, and I'm still baffled on how they got that movie made.
Dude, I have no idea.
Yeah, let's never speak of it again.
Yeah. The hierarchy of offensive content goes blasphemy, sex, and then violence. We can't blaspheme. That's a no-no. And then sex is just below that. So, I mean, that's my only explanation. It's not a good one.
I'll take it.
So that's pretty much the end of the movie. After Larry has been bludgeoned to death, Maliva arrives and says the same sort of poem over Larry. He transforms back into a man. And for as much time as it took to shoot that sequence, I think it works really well.
Yeah, I agree.
They will get better at it as the movies progress, but I think here the more subtle approach works incredibly well.
I thought there was a couple cool transitional pieces of makeup along the way there. It was very interesting. And yeah, like I said earlier, I like how it sort of reminded me of the end of The Invisible Man, when it's like you die and you become back to normal again, kind of. And then I really loved the hard exit. Like, we are just out of this movie.
Yes.
It's just crushed the credits roll.
Yes, and we have not yet gotten to a point where a universal monster is immortal. I mean, the mummy is maybe the closest we get in that he was dead and is resurrected, but he definitively dies at the end of that. But so far, we have definitive ends for all of these universal monsters. I want to say Frankenstein meets the Wolfman is the first time where one of those characters becomes supernatural. I think that's where we established that the Wolfman is immortal and not dead. But we will get there.
Cannot wait.
I do like that this has a definitive end. The Wolfman is dead. Audience at the time in 1941 did not know he would return. I love the ending for this. This is such a tight film. We've referenced it's an hour and 10 minutes. There's very little fat on this. It's hard for me to imagine this movie being more efficient. I think it does everything really, really well. What do you think of The Wolfman now that we've watched the whole thing?
This movie's terrific. I think efficiency, you said it, maybe a little too efficient, right? Like, I'd like an extra, I mean, with every one of these pretty much so far, with certain exceptions, an hour and 10 minutes is just not long enough for this. Like, it needs an extra 10 minutes or something like that. And there's plenty of places here to do it. You could pick any of those spots and make it an interesting scene or two. I don't want to say there's no way to, like, ruin this, but, like, you could definitely pump this up a little more, and I love what's here. I truly love what's here, but like that spyglass sequence gotta go. Maybe one or two more nights of him transforming and weird stuff happening, a couple more things of animals being unnerved around him, and yeah, I mean, otherwise, like, I'm really glad to have rewatched this movie. I love it. I look forward to rewatching it again. I'm reinvigorated, Dan. Like, there's no way I was ever gonna quit or anything, but like, the last couple movies were a trial. They were a bit of a trial, and like, this is far more greater reward than I was expecting, because revisiting this was just such a joy. So I'm very glad to have done it.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming up on the Monster Rally era of the Universal Monsters, right? So we're going to see Larry Talbot again as he shares the screen with the Frankenstein monster and Dracula, and even Bud Abbott and Lou Costello. So there's going to be no shortage of werewolf stuff for us to talk about in the episodes to come. I mean, Universal definitely got their money's worth out of Lon Chaney Jr., that's for sure. Well, with that, I think it's time for us to vanish into the foggy night. But we'll be back on Friday, November 26th to talk more Lon Chaney Jr., as well as Bela Lugosi, Ralph Bellamy, and Evelyn Enkers, all of whom return for 1942's The Ghost of Frankenstein. In the meantime, you can follow us on Twitter at MonsterMadePod, on Instagram and Facebook at The Monsters That Made Us, and you can email us at themonstersthatmadeus@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan Colón. Mike, where can listeners find you online?
You can follow me on Twitter at _Mikester, and you can listen to all the other shows I'm on at cageclub.me, facebook.com/cageclub, or at cageclubpod on Twitter and Instagram.
If you enjoyed this episode and you want to become a Patreon supporter, you can do so at patreon.com/themonstersthatmadeus. You can also support the show by giving us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. That helps more people to discover the show. And we can't forget about our t-shirts on TeePublic. You can find the link for that in our aforementioned Twitter and Instagram bios. For all other things Cage Club related, just head on over to cageclub.me. That's cageclub.me. I hope you enjoyed this 80th anniversary celebration of the Wolfman as much as we did. We'll see you next time. Stay spooky, everybody.